Okay, good afternoon. Now we are going to start the session, right? In the last week, can you remember where we stopped? What we talked about in the last week? Yes? Yes, anyone? What is the area that we talked about in the last week? Yes, have you gone through the notes? PPT? Yes? So what we talked? Can't you remember? Sorry? Yes, actually, that is the one part. Yes, elasticity. Finally, we talk about the elasticity, and then we talk about the some theoretical things behind the consumer behavior, no, right? Theory behind the demand curve, no, right? So basically, two theories we identified there. No? Can you remember? Utility theory and the indifference curve analysis. So the utility theory based on the cardinal approach, no, right? So that will explain under the diminishing marginal utility theory and the equimarginal utility theory, no, right? We talk about the consumer equilibrium, right? So under the diminishing marginal utility, what is the basic condition? Can you remember? Yes, you. What is the condition there? So when you talk about the consumer equilibrium or the relationship between the price and the quantity demand, what is the condition? We talk about the price and the marginal utilities, no? Right? Price equal marginal utility, no? Right? So the consumer demands goods until the price equal marginal utilities. Yeah. So we identified that condition, right? We must remember all these things, right? So now we have very few lectures to go through, no? Right? We are in the mid of the course now, no? Right? So this is the fourth course, the fourth week, no? That we are continuing, right? So then under the equimarginal utility, what is the condition? So we identified two conditions. Can you spell me the blue shirt? What is your name? You. What's your name? Yes, Ravindra. Okay. Tell me what is the two conditions we highlighted there? So we highlighted two conditions, no? Under the marginal utility theory, right? So when we explain the consumer equilibrium, can you remember? Next one, other neighbor. So can you remember? What's your name? Yes. Tilina, do you have any idea? There we identified two conditions. Can't you remember? So one is the regarding the income, no? Right? Because consumer always try to maximize the utility, by allocating the limited income, no? Right? So there we identified, we assume the income allocate in such a manner, no? Right? To maximize the utility as far as when you concern the particular consumer, no? Right? So that means total income distributed among between the two products, no? Right? So that is the first condition, no? Right? Price into price of X into QX plus price of Y equal price of Y into QY. That will equals to income, no? Right? And the other one, what is the other condition? That is the marginal utility of expenditure, no? Between the two products should equal, no? Right? So MUX over PX equal MUY over PY, no? Since we consider two products, no? Right? So the marginal utility of the money expenditure, no? Between the two products must equal, no? Right? If these two conditions satisfy, so we identified in a table, we identified the equilibrium also, no? Right there. So MUX, right? Sometimes you may given equations, no? Right? Regarding the marginal utility and the prices, right? So if you have such information, you must be able to calculate the utility maximization combination, right? So the quantities that the consumer consume in order to maximize the utility, right? So I will now from the first lecture, I uploaded the review questions tutorial for you, right? So you can go through those things and other lectures also. Subsequently, I will upload the tutorials, right? So you need to go through all these things and you need to do all the tutorials as your homework, okay? And if there are any questions, you can discuss with your friends, or otherwise you can contact me, right? If you have any questions, right? So I will clarify all these things. And first thing is to go through those things and attempt to do all these questions, right? So that is very much important, right? So then we identified some of the things when we explain that we derived the demand curve, no, right? So why the demand curve is downward sloping based on the indifference curve analysis, no, right? You may remember, right? So finally, where we stop, we talk about this price consumption curve and the income consumption curve, no, right? ICC and the BCC, no, right? Now ICC, we talk about what? Basically now the bundle of goods that the consumer consume, no, right? So when the income level increase, no, right? So since the income level, that is, we assume the nominal income, no, right? Nominal income increase or decrease, no, right? Here we assume nominal income increase continuously, no, right? So the consumer has freedom to decide the appropriate bundle of goods, no, right? So when the income level goes up, no, right? So he has more room to buy or demand more goods from the two access, no, right? That means that from the bundles, no, right? From each bundle, no, right? X or Y, no, right? So considering those equilibrium points, we identify the income consumption curve, right? Income and the demand, no, right? Simply it's explained the income and the demand for the products, no, that the consumer consume, no, demand, no, right? Now here we see the upward sloping, no, demand, upward sloping ICC, no, right? Income consumption curve, no, right? So that is something that explains the positive relationship between the income and the demand for the goods, no, right? So such kind of relationship we experience for the normal goods, no, right? That we consider, no? When the normal goods and the income level increase, demand also increase, right? So what when you look at this income consumption curve, right? So there may be other way around some kind of slopes, downward sloping curves, no, right? Backward sloping curves, right? So you must be able to realize what is the type of product, no, right? Based on the income and the demand for such goods, no, right? So if there is, we know that there is a negative relationship between the income and the demand for the product in case of inferior good, no, right? And there may be exceptional cases, given good also, given paradox, no, right? Some kind of backwardness, no, right? So there is, because the what you call this price effect is more powerful in such cases, no, right? We identify, right? So that is another case, right? And also we highlight the price consumption curve. So there actually we take the now price, no, price change, right? Price can be changed in the two axes, no, the price of the product X or price of the product Y, no, right? So if there is changes in the price of the product, what kind of things that we can observe? So we observe that there is a rotation in the budget line, no, right? So when there is a change in the price of the goods. So we identify two factors that shift the budget line. So what is the first factor that shift the budget line? We identify two factors. What is the first factor that change the budget line or shift the budget line, the entire budget schedule upward or downward? Product. Yes. Price of the product.
So I'm going to speak something that it is within. So I think is a first speaking if you also want to sphere, like the sphere here and they predict that the data is not it. And every year we are the ratio without kind of last time also we have a connection. This time also we are conducting. And normally that debate is organized by the most junior batch. They are the most junior that joined the team in the Norway in. So they are the and it's a lot of and from your batch, all the normally that extension they are giving the support. Support means that participation. Participation. They are not asking the extra cost. Participation in the senior, most senior, they are very well instrumented, very professionally, these is the guys and support them and guide them. So that guide is for maybe the we will give you a contact number for the and we will go to the family. Excellent. And legal is 500. Yeah, the last time 600, this time 500. And participation in the class meeting. 27, right? And also, yeah, 27, when we know the issues are there, but few requests we can conduct that. We find that Vara every day. Actually, there are attendance is compulsory. We are not allowing anyone to come to the exam and also see
18% or 18% from.
no 8%. 8% and also something else. But if you are you can inform us early and we keep following the education access and education following the education of the day. No problem. Means you are mature. Also, please help us center, you are getting the essential. And we and also we have content message to the CD guide and they are making it difficult to get the properly accepted. Support them and we know the yeah, thank you and also please support for the and the money and give the shit in the day is completed. And it is around the ground in the location will be shared. Then yeah, you can share that, right? Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for the
Right. So they are the juniors, no? Right? Freshers. Freshers are the beginning of the freshers. Okay, right. What I have, yes. Yes, product prices and the income, those are the factors, right? If the income change, the entire target line sheet to the right or left, right? Entire budget line sheet, right? And then, you know, so because there is a possibility of having the two products, you know, you can have two products, both right, right? Budget line, so right. The other one is the price of the product, right? Maybe the price of the product is what, right? You cannot take both sides, no, both. Yes, like the price of the particular product, right? Other price of the other product is not. So if there is such thing, we know that there is a rotation, right? From the price change taxes, both right? product that we consider, right? So that is the rotation, right? Now here we assume the rotation because there is a price change, right? So the prices, what happened? Why the budget line rotate from the x-axis? Because price of the oil shift, right? Rotation to the right, right? Like, right? Because price of the product X decrease, right? We can assume price of the product decrease from PL1, PL2, PL3, like that, right? So there is an opportunity to consume more from the product X, more from the product X, right? Because it's nominal income does not change, but the price of the product X, real income increase, right? So you can go for higher consumption level from the product, which is actually identified here. So decline of the price of the product X, right? So that protect the budget line, right, from the x-axis. Right? So taking all these rotations from the bundles consumed, right, by the consumer. So when there is a decline in the price of the product X, right, we identify the equilibrium points, right? So equilibrium points, you know that is the tangent point of the indifference curve and the budget line, right? So why we are moving from here to here? Yeah, moving from here to here. Earlier the situation is here. Consumer is equilibrium at the point here, right? Let's say point A, right? We move from A to B, B like that, right? So there is a movement in the equilibrium because consumer has the opportunity to consume more from product X, with the decline in the price of the product X. So that the taking this equilibrium point, right? The points, right? So we can derive the price consumption curve, right? With respect to the price change, how the consumer choose the margin of products includes, like X and Y, right? So we combine these points, we can do the price consumption, right? So that is the thing basically we identified last week, right? I had certain things, right? Yes, I explained all these things further, right? Now, what is the income consumption curve? It's actually gives us the equilibrium points, right? At various levels of consumer income, every income change, right? So that the focus on the income, right? Equilibrium points, right? So in other words, you can say income consumption curve, ICC represent how the consumers consume the bundle of bundles, change in the money income, not in the change in money, right? For consumers, right? Now we assume there is assumption also, right? So don't forget the consumption. We assume other factors remaining constant, right? When the income change, all other factors remaining constant. So if this value assumption is there, right? So when you define the ICC, you need to explain that one, right? Otherwise, the definition is wrong, right? Because we assume other things remaining constant. What are the other things? Apart from the income, the prices, right? Price of the other inputs, like price, all other things that goes to the demand remain unchanged, except the income, right? Now, when you look at now earlier we see the price consumption curve, income consumption curve, upward sloping, right? So always upward sloping, it may be a downward sloping or backward sloping, right? So we can identify positive or negative relationship, right? Mostly the positive in the case of normal goods, negative in the case of inferior goods, right? Right? And normally we see the ICC, right? Normal goods upward sloping, right? Negative relationship we identify in case of inferior goods, right? So that means negative relationship means it may be downward sloping to the left, right? Or backward sloping to the downward sloping to the right, backward sloping to the left, right? So that means backward means this way, right? Backward sloping maybe like this, right? Or like this, right? So the downward sloping from left to right, backward sloping from left to, sorry, left side, right, that goes from into left side. Now, in this case, now initially we see the positive kind of relationship later on, a negative relationship. Right? So, in the case of inferior, right? This is downward sloping, right? So, that is actually now, so this is kind of now, this is the income access input, right? Here the income, right? So normally, and the product X demand, right? So that can be either backward or downward sloping. So that, right? Now we can see the, so when the income level increase, so that's why the budget line is to the right, not right. Each level, now the field wheel, so basically the balance scale 1 to 5, very like because the change in income, pressure can go for the higher consumption point. So that gives you higher satisfaction, right? So therefore, current score shift to the right, not right. So the budget line shift to the right because income level increase, right? So these points, particular points on line, right? So that gives the ICC long time. But initially at the initial level income, lower level income, that's something when income increase, what happened? So if you take this number, right? Demand that also increase, right? Initially increase, but later on after the point B, it decrease, no? With the level of income. No? Here after point B with the income, when the income increase, what happened? Right? So demand for the number decrease, no? Right? We take the particular that, right? So number is the inferior production techniques, no? Right? At the lower level income, it's normal, but when the income level increase, it become inferior. The demand less, no? Right? When we go to higher, other function for the other function, right? So this kind of curve, right? So it's a backward curve, no? Right? So normally the backward curve here we need to see this in the case of products, right? Okay. Right, backward to the left, right? And here downward sloping, right? Downward sloping from left to right, no? Right? Is it clear? Right? Can you understand, right? So here also now what happened, income level increase, no? Right? The consumer can consume from both products and Y, right? So if the level of income rising, right, it can go for a higher consumption point, right? So we may increase the consumption on the assume this X to X and Y, right? So now here what happened? When the income level increase, demand for the goods X also increase or decrease? Demand for the product X increase or decrease? Demand for the product X increase, right? Demand for the product Y decrease, right? Right? Signal, right? With the rising, right? So that is the downward sloping, right? So that's also right. Now, if we take the what the product is, product Y is a inferior, no, right? Product X is normal, no, right? So here actually we see the product X, Y, right? Product Y. So when the income level increase, demand for the product Y initially increase, become normal, but later on tends to decrease. Now here we take that after Q is Q2.5 for the demand for the product Y decrease, right? With the rising income. Okay. So that is the inferior feedback. So in the case of inferior work, there can be what is the nature of the ICC? It can be backward or downward slope. So normally that's a positive one, upward sloping curve you observe in the case of normal slope. Right, is it clear? Right? Is it clear? Right. Any question? Because there will be a inferior test, no? Will be given some of these things may be tested, right? So therefore you need to remember all this, right? Even though the simple thing, right? You need to be right. Now I will also highlight, but you know that is not right. You are be able to obtain highest mark for continual satisfaction, right? From the board, right? We need to go to the highest level from, right? From the board, continual satisfaction and final exam, pass the exam, right? If we, because the unit from there at least, that the continuous satisfaction, the final exam. Pass mark is 50, right? So that's right. So we are going to all these sectors, right? Now, I got only the 16 student base, right? The outside into the office side. There are around 30 students, 32 students, I got according to my report, right? For registration. So when my affiliate do this as well, right? They elects. So here I mean now I don't know if there are other students, right? Because yeah, I think the participation online. Only the review students, I observe online participation, right? Basically, also around 60 more than now 620, but there are 22 students. So, 30, maybe they are not following this, but this is there. Anyway, I will upload over the this layer time. I don't know what I can about it, right? So when I asked from the office, they gave me the full list, right? Again, I can go and so the player. But your one is also there, right? So it's saying that as you described, it is like so they look available, right? Okay. So this is the ICC and the ICC, right? Now, if you look at the angel curve, right? So if one we take the income change and the demand to particular product, right? The relationship. Right? So that explained in the angel curve, right? Now here the income we take and the economy of workers, right? So that means demand for workers, right? So one product, and the income level fixed, right? What about the demand, right? For workers, right? So the we take the you consider only one product with the change with income, right? So the relationship income and the demand for that product will give us the same thing that we explained with the points, right? Over angel curve, right? So in the angel curve, in here we see the positive relationship, negative relationship, right? That one, right? Normally, when the income level increase, demand for burger increase, like quantities demand increase. In the case of normal system, right? Then it becomes negative, right? So in the case of the income, right? Prices, right? Move from B to C, that was so, right? So there is a it become increase. So we can either this normal and then we take it back by looking at the angel curve, right? The angel curve we take into account the income change and the goods, the relationship between the income and the expenditure or the demand for the product, right? We take one product, the particular change, right? So then we identify by looking at the shape of the demand curve relation. We get right? Right. So that is the angel curve, right? Right. Then we talk about the PCC, right? With respect to price change, right? So that's also very important, right? Price consumption curve, right? So that is very much important as we discussed earlier when we derive the demand curve, right? Because demand curve represents the relationship between the price and the demand, right? When the price of your own product change, whatever you demand, right? So based on that, right? So here the price consumption curve also explain the relationship with the prices, with the change in the price, how it is added to the equilibrium, right? So therefore, based on that, we can draw the demand curve, right? Now the price consumption curve, that also explain the selection of bundles of goods, right? With the change in the prices of the income, change in the price, right? There are also we assume other factors. Here we take income, reference, all other factors remaining once. Right? So that is the easy fashion. So what is the, now we know that one thing maybe talk about the demand curve. So we observe that the demand curve is downward sloping, no, right? So we identified the two factors, no, right? That goes to downward sloping demand. Can you remember? So what are those factors? Theoretically, we identify two factors, no? Two effects, no? Right? What is that? One is income effect and the substitution effect, no? Right? Now, based on the price consumption curve, right? So we can identify this income effect and the substitution effect. We know that with respect to change in the prices, no, two incidents can be happen, no, right? When the price decrease, what happen? Is there are so many substitutes available in the market, no, right? Right. So why the demand for the product, the price, product that decrease the price is high, no? Because others select the product, no, which has a lower price, no, right? When the price decrease, other consumers also demand this product, no, right? Since there are substitutes, no, right? Substitution effect is there, no, right? And the other one is when the price change of the, we assume the income is constant here, that is the nominal income, no, right? But real income change, no, right? When the price change. When there is a decline in the price, real income increase, no, right? So then the demand for the product also increase, no? There we identify the income effect, no, right? So why there is a negative relationship between the price and the quantity demand, we identify the two effects, no? Because of two effects, no, right? One is the income effect, other one is the substitution effect. Now, how do you explain that one? Based on the this price consumption by looking at the behavior of the price consumption curve, right? Now here that we can identify those two effects, no, right? With respect to change in the price, no, right? So how we need to now we identify now these are the combined effects, no, right? So why when the price increase, why the quantity demand increase? Because of the income effect and the substitution effect, no, right? So that explained by the total effect, no, right? So when the price decrease, quantity demand increase because of the income and the substitution effect, no, right? So that explained by the total effect, no, right? Right. So therefore, we can identify the substitution effect, income effect, and the adding those two total effect. Due to the total effect, we observe there is a negative relationship between the price and the quantity demand, right? Now we need to separate these two effects, no, right? So how we clearly identify these two effects separately. So that is the problem, no, right? Now if we take the, now we are going to identify separate 2 points, right? Right. Now here, now we take the initial, right? So the now you know that what is now this U1, U2, U3, those are here, no, right? So that representing the indifference map, no, right? Indifference map, can you remember? There can be different combinations, no, right? That the consumer can perceive, no, right? Based on different income levels, right? So that may be indifference that map, no, right? So there can be different indifference, right? But now our constraint is the budget, no, right? Depending on the income, no, we will go for the appropriate cost, no, right? So there can be different budget lines also, no, right? People, right, some levels, no, right? Like we take particular case, but the point, no, right? This budget line and the indifference of channel, no, right? So that is the equilibrium point as we discussed earlier, right? So we are trying to maximize the utility subject to the given income, right? Income is fixed, no, right? Income is fixed, no, right? Then income is fixed, right? So we are going to maximize the utility based on the given income. Blue line explains the given income, fixed income, no, right? Because income is fixed, right? So based on the given income, we are trying to maximize the utility that we consume different combinations from the X and Y, right? Because in a particular indifference curve or budget line is made one combination of right of products, no, right? The same satisfaction given line, but at a particular line, particular point, we come to the equilibrium, right? Based on the given income. That point we identify as the tangent point of the budget line and the indifference curve of line. So the budget line, can you remember the equation? Right? We derive the equation, right? And the slope of the indifference curve, that is the marginal rate of substitution, right? So how we speed of substituting the product x to y or y to x, right? Because when we increase the consumption of the one product, we need to sacrifice the consumption of the other product, right? Right. But we maintain the same level of satisfaction along the given indifference curve, right? Because any point of this indifference curve gives us same level of satisfaction, right? Right. So that is the tangent point here. The MRS equal the slope of the budget line. So what is the slope of the budget line? What is the slope of the budget line? Well, answer that is the price ratio between the two products, X and Y. Px or Py or Py or Px. Right. So that is the price ratio. Right. So the demand is equal price ratio. Right. Remember the equilibrium point. Right. So this MRS we can take delta Y over delta X. Right. That is the marginal rate of substitution. How the consumers are waiting to substitute or the product X to Y, Y to X. So that is the one you get the substitution. At the equilibrium point, it goes exactly the price ratio. That is the slope of the line. Right. Right. At this point is the equilibrium point. Really know these things, right? And again, that can remember the points when we decide when I say the C time equilibrium point. So what are the conditions, right? What's not right? I think we'll be able to what are the conditions that need to be satisfied, right? You can explain in equations, not right? They need the slope of these two curves, right? Right. Now, this is the equilibrium point. We consider y1 and x1 quantities, right? Y and x respectively, right? So what happened? So that how if we take the equilibrium point here, right? So that actually is the particular point that the consumer consume at a given prices, right? Because this budget line will be at a particular price. Can you remember? So we don't have time if we need to record all these things, right? How the budget line will be based on the particular price, no? Can you remember? IODX or DY. IODX. These are the points that we consider, no? Right? Extreme point. So scope if we take, that is the price ratio, no? Right? We take the price ratio, that is the scope of the budget line. Right? Right. So that is the now, at a particular price, we consider all these things, E1, X, right? So these points we take, at this equilibrium point, there is a price, the price for the product X and the Y, right? Okay. Now, with respect to if the price of the one product change, right? You know that explains the change in the quantities, right? So that is maybe that's the result of income and substitution effect. So how do we separate those effects from this analysis, right? Now we take the first we take now yeah right. We reduce the now first we there is the income effect for the substitution, right? If we remove the income effect, we can identify the balance line with the substitution effect. So how do you remove the income effect? You change in the price by shifting the budget line parallel to the this budget line, right? If you shift the budget line, right? From here to here, right? So we can identify the that is behind the difference of 4, right? Right. If we reduce the income level, right? So that means the our purchasing power decrease, we are going for the lower indifference curve, right? Is it true? That means the real income, right? So if we remove the income level, right? So we are going for the lower satisfaction, right? So we can consider another one was close, but lower combination than the income, right? So that will give us the U3 curve, right? So now this curve we shift to the left, right? So parallel, right? And then to the U3 line, right? Now that means tangent point is the 3 double prime, right? Okay. Earlier the tangent point is 3 prime. Now when we remove the income effect, right? So how we remove the income effect by shifting the budget, right? Parallel to existing budget line, right? Shift to the left, no, right? So that will touch the indifference curve U3, right? So then that's the point where it's not clear C double prime, right? So that particular combination we can see there, right? Okay. Now, yes, this is the tangent point, right? Okay. Now, what happened? So this is the quantity that we consume from the product X, right? And this is the quantity that we consume earlier, right? So when there is a reduction in the income level, we are moving from X1 to this point, right? Let's assume X2, right? And X2 is point, right? So if we again from the income, what happened? It moves from here to here, right? So that is due to the income effect, right? From X2 to X1, right? So that's the double prime to C1 explain the income effect. So then other thing, right? So that means we take the X0, right? Here the combination from here, right? So that is the Y0 and the X0 level, right? We see the X0 to X2, that is the substitution effect, right? Substitution effect, right? So we can identify those two effects, right? Right? Change in the budget line by shifting the budget line, right? First, we remove the budget income effect, right? In order to identify the income effect, right? We shift the budget line parallel to the real budget line. Then we can identify the income effect, right? And the other effect is the substitution effect, right? From the total effect, we can identify the substitution effect, right? So the income effect, substitution effect is the S3 and the T is the total effect. Now what is the, we can identify the nature of the product. If it is a normal good, right? We know that the income effect also positive, right? And the income level increase, demand problem positive. And the substitution effect also positive, right? The rise in the income, right? It's all right. And the total effect on matter positive, right? Okay. And the inferior good, what happened? Income effect. When the income increase, demand for the inferior good decrease. No, it's negative. But there can be a substitution effect also positive, no, right? But the total effect is now negative. Why? Because in the case of inferior good, the income effect is more powerful, no, right, than the substitution effect, right? The income effect is more powerful than the substitution effect. But in the other case, different news, what happened? So that is also we know that it's a type of inferior good, no, right? But there's a difference between the inferior good and the different good. So how we differentiate that one? By looking at the total effect, right? Here you can identify the same effect as inferior product, no, right? Because here the refund would also, income effect also negative. Substitution effect also positive, right? Because the case of refund would, we know that there's a positive relationship between the price and the quantity. Right? When the price increase, demand also increase. So there is high powerful substitution effect. Right? Here the total effect is should be positive or negative. In case of refund, it is positive, right? So they are actually substitution effect. Price effect is more powerful than the income effect, no? Right? Because it's an exceptional case to demand, right? So that we can identify it, right? So in the different case, right? So it's actually a, can see the according, right? So the here thought effect is positive, right? So that is the we differentiate between the expedient good and the refund good, right? GI or refund, no, right? Refund good, right? By looking at the total effect. For inferior good, their total effect is negative, but in case of refund good, uh, total effect is positive since there is a high substitution effect than the income effect, right? So we can identify that, no, right? So here when you look at this, when you can identify by looking at the price consumption curve, is given at the inferior case, no, right? So if it is movement with these equilibrium points, no, right? So the slope of these curves, right? ICC, so PCC, right? By looking at that, you can identify uh, different and the individual and the normal goods, right? So here we see the all the time what happened when the income level increase. So it's we are moving from substitution effect also positive, income effect also positive, no, right? Increase, no, right? And total effect also positive in this case. This is a normal type of. If there is a other way around, if there is a decline in the what you call the substitution effect, right? With that decline in the income effect, right? So if there's a rise in the income, if the demand increase, no, something, right? And identify the right? That case we can identify simply a different okay. So now we must remember this how we identify the price with respect to change in the price, no, right? How we can identify the income effect and the substitution effect. So that explains the downward sloping demand curve, no, right? Why the demand curve is downward slope, no, right? Left to right, no, right? Basically because of the income effect and the substitution effect, right? Okay, right. So those are the things that I last time I was unable to do it, right? Complete. So if there's any question, do you have any questions to ask regarding this? So that is also very important income consumption curve and the price consumption curve, right? With respect to change in the income and the with respect to change in the prices of the product, no, right? We can identify the equilibrium and the changes in the equilibrium, right? So by looking at those changes, we can identify the different products, right? The slope of the demand curve and the nature of the demand curve as well, with respect to change in the income and the prices. Okay, right. Okay, right. So we are moving to the next session then, right? How about before moving to the next one, right? How about your assignment? So next week I will give the individual assignment also, right? So that means several some sort of questions will be given to you, right? So you need to answer the questions and hand it over those things, right? Within 1 week. Is it okay? Huh? Now the 31st March is the group assignment closing date, no? Right? Do you need more time to the individual assignment? So then we will, now we have another 3 weeks, no? 2 weeks, no? 2 more weeks. No? Okay. This is the 4th week, no? 7, no? 3 weeks there. We have more three more to go, no? Right? Because we have the MCQ test also there, right? So once we complete this part, right? And වැඩිදින් දැන් ඔක්කොම අපි එකතු කරගත්තොත් ඔයාලට MCQ test වල coverage එක වැඩි වෙනවා, right? So better to limit the coverage and test your ability, no? Right? Based on that, no? Right? So we will, I thought to give you, right? Once we complete this session, right? Now this is the utility theory you finished now, difference curve, right? Then we start the national income, right? So today, right? And up to now, up to that area, we will test it from the MCQ. Is it okay? Right. So that is something like now with this, we are finished the microeconomic parts, right? Today, we are going to start the macroeconomic parts, right? So that's also very interesting area, no? Macroeconomics, right? So many things are there, right? But we will do depending on the time, right? And this is the principles of economics, no, right? We are not going to look at in a deeper way, right? Because ISLM analysis also there, right? In your curriculum, right? In the degree we are doing ISLM, so more than 2 months, right? We'll discuss deeply the ISLM model, right? So, but this is an overview of the ISLM model. I am not going to do all these things, right? So as a introduction to economics or the principle of economics, right? So even though that is there, right? We will do the overview of part of that, right? We are not going to cover all the areas of the ISLM model, right? But we will give sound understanding about the ISLM model, right? So you know ISLM? Anyone follow the ISLM? Anyone? Okay, so we will go through the overview of the ISLM model, identify this IS and the LM curve and the equilibrium, right? And some policy matters, right? Because in macroeconomics, now we are talking about today, right? It's a policy-oriented part in economics. Very interesting area. Right? My preferred area is the macroeconomics, right? So, right, okay. So then we will give you the 31st is the closing date of your group assignment, no? Right? After that, you will be given another 1 week time for you to submit your individual assignment, right? There actually the few questions will be given to you, right? Based on the past things, right? You need to answer, right? But don't copy your answers, right? Don't discuss with the others, right? If there are similar answers, same thing you cut and paste and, right? There will be a problem, negative marks will be given to you, right? Because that is the individual assignment, right? You need to do your workings and the way of presentation in your own way, right? Don't copy the other things, right? Others, you can refer on any other book or any other reference or even internet, but don't cut and paste the things, right? In the internet, right? But you can write it in your own way, right? Your own way, your own words, right? Taking making some differences, right? So that way you can do, right? So I will give you some questions, right? That is not difficult, right? So based on the things that we discuss, okay? Is it okay? Right. So then you need to answer that, right? So that is your individual assignment, right? So the group assignment is there and the MCQ test is there, right? Okay. Right. Okay, right. So today now we are going to talk about this introduction to macroeconomics, right? And national income determination, right? So some of you have made idea about the national income, right? Hands up those who study the national income, Jatikada, national income calculation, those things. and Keynesian model of national income, aggregate demand model, right? Those things. So you have done in economics, you talk about the national income, right? So those things also helpful for you, right? So we will discuss this one, right? Today we are going to discuss, right? So basically, this is an overview about the macroeconomics, right? Previous things we talk about the microeconomics, no? Right? So kind of microeconomic analysis. We talk about the demand, supply, utility, right? Indifference curve analysis and the market equilibrium, right? So those things are the microeconomic analysis. How the price is determined, how the equilibrium quantity is determined, change in the equilibrium and so on, right? Consumer behavior, producers behavior, all these things micro, right? So now that is actually we look at the particular sector, right? A particular market, how the price is determined. But when it comes to the macroeconomics, we look at the overall picture, right? Overall, the kind of overall analysis, right? We look at the economy as a whole, right? So that is very much important, right? So when you are analyzing the things, right? Now we need to look at the macro view, right? So the broader view, right? Then in the micro view, right? When we are explaining the certain problems, basic economic problems and so on, right? So that is very much important, right? So let's look at those things, right? And some of the areas in macroeconomics, right? Now here basically we are going to talk about why we study macroeconomics. So that means the importance of looking at the overall economic analysis, right? Why it is important, right? And we identify the major macro variables, right? And the macroeconomic problems and the policies, right? So in macroeconomics, it's a kind of economic analysis that we are analyze. When you analyze the overall economy, we do the economic analysis, right? So that is part of the economic analysis, and also it's covered the policies, right? In macroeconomics, we focus on two areas because we analyze the economy as a whole, right? And also we analyze the policy matters also, right? Because when we are explaining the behavior of these macro variables, right? So we need to change the behavior of the macro variables, right, in appropriate manner in order to achieve the economic objectives by designing the appropriate macroeconomic policies, right? So the policies are very much important and also highly discussed under the macroeconomics policy implications, right? So when you talk about some theories in macroeconomics, so there is a policy implication also, right? So policy impacts also discussed, right? So that's why we say the macroeconomic is a policy-oriented part, right? Even though it's a policy-oriented part, based on the analysis, we are going to solve the problems by designing the appropriate macroeconomic policies, right? So different policies are there, right? So that we will identify the major macro variables, right? Because in macroeconomics, we identify the set of macro variables to explain the overall economy, right? So how we identify the economy? Based on the set of macro variables, right? අපි ආර්ථිකය හඳුනගන්නේ සාර්වාර්ථික විචල්‍යයන් කියන්නේ macro variables, right? ඒ වගේ සංකලනයක් විදියට, right? Otherwise we cannot explain the overall economy, right? Because we are trying to explain the behavior of the overall economy, right? Under the macro economy, right? And then you will be able to understand the national income calculations and some problems, right? And the uses of national income calculation, right? Those things, right? And the benefits, right? And also we identify the macroeconomic equilibrium. So that is the different from the equilibrium that we talked about earlier. Microeconomic equilibrium, totally different from the macroeconomic equilibrium, right? In microeconomics, we say it's a partial equilibrium, right? Because we look at the particular market, how for the particular product, how the price and the quantities determine how the consumers and the producers come to the equilibrium situation there, right? individual point of view, no, right? But when it comes to the macroeconomics, since we look at the overall economy, right, it's a kind of general equilibrium analysis, no, right? So general equilibrium analysis. Microeconomics called as partial equilibrium analysis. අපි ආර්ථිකයේ කිසියම් පැතිකඩක් විතරයි බලන්නේ තියෙන්නේ. One aspect, particular market, how the particular industry, no, right? How the price is determined, no? How the consumers behave, how the producers behave, no, right? But in macroeconomics, we are not looking at the individual concern. We look at the overall, no, based on the macroeconomic aggregates. Again, ආර්ථික සමස්තයන් කියනවා based on the macroeconomic aggregates. So we look at the behavior of economic aggregates or and the averages, right, in macroeconomics. Right? So that explains the overall economic behavior, right? So we are going to look at the macroeconomic equilibrium. All the theories, even when you talk about the ISLM model, it's not a theory, it's a model that we can use to analyze the economy, no, right? Equilibrium. So there also we look at the equilibrium, the ISLM model. So that's a overall economic equilibrium, right? So since you look at all the markets, all the sectors in the economy, no, our overall economy, we look at the stable situation of the economy. So that is the macroeconomic equilibrium. Like we identified in the demand supply analysis equilibrium, we identify certain conditions, no, right? Demand should be equal to supply, no. There is no excess demand, excess supply at the equilibrium. In likewise, in the macroeconomic equilibrium also, there are certain conditions, right, in order to achieve, right? Not the demand, individual demand. Here, there we take the aggregate demand and the aggregate supply. Aggregate demand should be equal to the aggregate supply. And injection should be equal to the withdrawals, no, right, at the equilibrium, right? So likewise, we look at some of the conditions that need to be satisfied when we are explaining the macroeconomic equilibrium, right? So those things we'll understand when we talk about this course, right? Right. So now first we look at the why we study macroeconomics, why it is important. Right. So now you also know the importance of the macroeconomics rather than microeconomic analysis. When you are trying to interpret the current problems that we are facing, no, right? We have a problem, no, right? We are in the crisis situation, no, right? Our growth rates decrease, no, negative growth rate record. How much is the growth rate last year? Yes. Is it positive or negative? Negative, no, right? According to the central bank, that is the only official the reference that we have, no, right? Even though we have some kind of low assurance about some of the figures certain years, right? So that is according to central bank report, there's a 7.8% negative growth rate, no, right? 2022, no, right? So that's a problem, no, right? So in 2020, negative 4.3 or something, right? First time, no, right? So that is the historical negative growth rate. We look at some of the things, right? I think you refer, right? This PT, right? So that's a big problem we have, no, right? Growth rate is negative. So that means our productive expansion of the economy is negative, no, right? We are going other way around, no? Normally there should be a rise in GDP, no, right? But there is a decline in the GDP, no, right? That's why we had a negative growth compared with the previous year, no, right? It's a big problem, no, right? Our overall performance of the economy is declining compared with the previous year's growth rates, no, right? So that is the GDP, no, gross domestic product, no, right? Our total production, no, right? So that is the overall performance of the economy, right? Right. So that is declining compared with the previous year. That's a big problem, right? So we have debt crisis, no, right? In 2020, it's 120% as a percentage of GDP, no, right? So over 100%, no, right? Our income is not sufficient to pay off the debt, no, right? So now we declare the bankrupt, no, country, no, right? We are not paying the interest, right? But we have all the things are accumulating, no, big installments. That means the interest payment is there, no, right? Once we start the payment, no, right? So there is a big outflow of foreign exchange, no? They need to pay, no? Right? All these debt, no? Right? So debt are very uh, high amount, no? Right? Domestic debt and the foreign debt, no? Right? We have a big problem, right? Debt rises there. Apart from that, what else? What kind of problem that we have? Inflation, no? Right? Recently, no? Right? We experience high inflation situation, no? Right? So the central bank has to adapt. So the kind of demand management policies, no, right? By raising the interest rate. That's why central bank raised the policy rates, no, right? Policy rates in order to control the inflation, no, right? By contracting the money supply, no, liquidity in the market, right? Credit expansion, no, right? So when the central bank raised the policy rates, credit expansion, credit to the private sector decrease, no, right? So that will reduce the demand for the credit, no, right? So that way, demand management kind of policy central bank use, no, in order to control the inflation, no, right? So we had a high inflation, no, right? Still, we have a certain level of inflation, high inflation situation, no, in the country, no, right? And also the balance of payment problems, no, right? Our exports earning decrease, no, right? Import rise, no, import expenditure increase, no, overriding the export income, no, right? There's a negative current account balance, no, right? And the overall balance also negative, no, right? So exchange rate depreciate, no, right? Right. Those are the problems, no, right? And the poverty, apart from that, unemployment problems, no, right? Because of the industry, private sector industries are not expanding, no, right? Since there is no conducible environment for the investments, no, still, no, right? And investors are not coming, no, right? Foreign investments, no, and the domestic private sector was stagnating, no, right? And there are a lot of problems in the SME, no, small, medium enterprises, no, right? Their market, no, right? So they are to close down so much of business ventures, no, right? So many problems are there in the economy, right? So we need to analyze all these problems and must find the suitable solutions, no, right? For this, no, right? So in order to analyze all these problems, no, right? We need to look at the overall economic behavior, no, right? The kind of overall economic analysis is very much important rather than looking at the individual perspectives, right? So we need to look at the overall economy, right? Based on the theoretical things, right? We need to interpret these problems and find solution by designing appropriate policies, right? So that is very much important, right? Now the policy sides, there is no uh, innovations, no, right? So what kind of policies that we need to use, no, right? So it's still not clear, no, right? So since they are politicians, they are talking about different things, no, right? So in order to understand the problem and provide some sort of solution for these problems, right? You need to know about the macroeconomics, no, right? Overall economic behavior, the variables and their relationship, how these variables are changed over the time, no, likewise, no, right? So that is very much important. That's why you need to study the macroeconomics, no, right? So that's why you need to look at the overall economic behavior, right? Right. So when you look at the overall economic behavior, you can understand the variables, macro variables, their interrelationship, right? So how we can control these variables, right? And so, right? And how we can use the appropriate policies to address or to control these macro variables with the view to achieving the economic objectives and so on. Right? So that's why you need to study about the macroeconomics. Okay, is it clear? Right, now you can look at these things in different aspects, right? Now for an example, now some questions apart from those questions I highlighted earlier. So those are the major problems, right? If I ask you a question, what are the major macroeconomic problems currency facing, no, right? So you can explain all these problems, right? Lower income, no? Lower growth, no, right? Because our per capita income also decreased, right? Earlier we are in the high income category, no, right? But now we are in the lower middle income category, no? Since our per capita income decrease below 4,000, no? It's around $3,600 something, right? Right. So that's the problem, no? Right? And unemployment, poverty, no, right? balance of payment problem, debt prices, those are the major problems. So inflation, no, right? Those are the major macroeconomic issues, no, right? So that's why we need to analyze the economy, right? You can look at some questions we have, apart from that, right? Now, income higher today than they were in 1950s, right? Now, if you look at our income level, so can you imagine our income level in 1950s? After independence, how much is our per capita income? Yes, dollar. It's around $152. Our per capita income in 1950, $152. Right. Now it is how much? $3,700. That's the main thing, right? 3,700 now. Now there is a gradual increase in the per capita income, right? Time to time it's increased, decreased, right? Right. So we need to identify what sort of factors that cause to change the income, right? So how this income behave over the time period, fluctuations, no, right? When you analyze those things, you can look at the what kind of factors cause to change the income level of the country, no, right, over the time period. Right? Then you can think about the future income as well, no, right? Like if you analyze the past income, right, future income also you can predict, no, right? Like we did in the forecasting, no, demand forecasting, right? So likewise, no, right? So we see the over the time period, income level increase or decrease, fluctuate, no, right? So we need to identify why there is such changes, how it is evolved, no, right? And also now, if you look at the inflation, no, last time very recently we experienced high inflation situation, right? If you compare with other countries, no, even income and the inflation, no, right? We see some other countries maintain higher income level, our income level is low, no? Why there is such a difference, no, right? And the inflation also, some countries maintain stable inflation price level, no? Some countries has high inflation and pressure. Why there is such a difference? We need to address all these things, right? And the growth rates, no, right? Some countries maintain higher growth rate, no, right? But certain other countries maintain lower growth rate, no, right? Now we identify the emerging markets, emerging countries, no, right? The high growth rates, right? So why there is such a change, right? So we need to look at all these things. And also time to time we experience recession and the depressions, no, right? So downturn in the economic activity and the upturns in the economic activities, no, right? What is recession? What is depression? Yes. What is recession? Recession. අපි ආර්ථික අවපාතය කියන්නේ මොකක්ද? Recession. And the depression, is it same thing or different? Yes. Recession is the normally there is a downturn in economic activities, no, decline in the GDP, no, right? So that is recession. What are the symptoms? So GDP increase, no, right? Inflation, price level increase, no, right? Unemployment level increase, no? Investment decrease, no, right? Right? Private investment decrease, no, right? So in a recession, right? So the world economy also experienced time to time this recession period, no, right? So in 1920s there was a great depression, no, right? Great downturn in economic activity. That is called depression, right? So so the depression means that if there is a severe decline in the output, right, over a longer period, right? If the problem is very serious, no, right? With these symptoms, no, right? That is identified as depression, no, right? And also there is a stagflation, no? Stagflation. What is stagflation? අපි කියන්නේ ආර්ථික එක තැන පල් වෙනවා කියලානේ, right? So there is no movement, no, right, in the economy. There may be the lower income level, no, right? And the price level also sometimes may be lower and stable, right? and the high unemployment, lower unemployment level, right? Employment level, right? So, and there is no expectation of the people, right? Regarding the economic behavior, right? We cannot imagine, right? So likewise, right? So that is stagflation. If the problems are prevail, right? So, and we cannot see any, that means the improvements in the economic activities, no, like in the future, no, right? People also expect same expectations, right? Likewise, stagflation, right? So, so time to time, the world economy experience these recessions, no, right? And depressions, no, right? Our financial tsunami, no, right? World economic crisis, no, right? In 1997, we had a East Asian crisis, no, right? Then 1995, 2005, no, right? And very recently now, this corona and all these things, no, right? Crisis situation, no, right? So time to time, we experience this recession. In 1970s also, right? Crisis situation because of the oil price hike, no, right? In 90, first oil price hike happened in 1971. First oil price hike in the world economy. So that create inflation pressure at that time, right? So in 1970s. So that's why the different class of people, economies also developed in 1970s, right? Since there's high inflation pressure in the world economy, monetary, right? So likewise, right? So we can identify these economic upstreams and the downstreams, right? What kind of factors goes to these recessions and the depressions, right? We need to identify and the policy action, right? So what kind of policy that we need to use, design, right, in order to solve the problems, right? Now, we are now facing the problem, right? So we need to design appropriate policies, right, to overcome this situation, right? Policies is very much important, right? We should have a policy, right? Right. So, so that need to be done, right? So policy actions, right? So in order to overcome the situations, right? So therefore, we need to look at the theoretical things, theory, right? And the models, right? So when we use the appropriate the actions, policy actions, and to solve these problems, right? So that's why we need to study about the macroeconomics. So the macroeconomics with the overall economic analysis, right? Uh, explain or give us suitable solutions, right, for these problems. Right. Okay, right. So the basically the macroeconomics, right? Analyze the overall economy, right? The kind of analysis economy as a whole, right? We look at the economy as a whole. If you compare with the microeconomics analysis in small, right? We look at the individual behavior. When we come to the macroeconomics, we look at the overall economic behavior, right? Since we look at the economic aggregates, right? So basically, we look at the macroeconomic variables, behavior of the macroeconomic variables, right? So what are the major aspects that we concern there, right? Economic aggregates and the averages, right? When you look at the overall economy, right, we look at the behavior of the economic aggregates and the averages. So what are the economic aggregates? So those are the national that explain the overall economy, national income, national output, right? National expenditure, right? And the balance of payment budget, right? So overall, right? And the averages, those are the average prices, right? Now the inflation, right? So that's a kind of average price, right? And the interest rate, right? Now we take the weighted average interest rate, right? 12 months treasury bill rates, average rate, right? It's average, right? And the exchange rate, right? So that's the average rate, right? So we look at the behavior of the economic aggregates and the averages, right? When you analyze the overall economy, right? So basically, in simply we can say, so when we explain the economic behavior of the economic aggregates and the averages, right? We look at the determinants. So what determine these economic aggregates or average or the macro variables? No? And what kind of relationship is there, right? Because these macro variables are interrelated, right? So that's why the complexities arise, right? When we explain the behaviors, right? Because output and maybe the price level, exchange rate, internal factors, external factors, no? All these things are related, no? Right? We can't, when we explain the one thing, it may affect to the other things as well, right? When we design the policy to address particular thing, other variable also affected, right? So therefore, it's may create complex situations, right? Since there's an interrelationship. So we need to observe, analyze this relationship between the macro variables and also the trend that means how these variables change over the time, right? Over the time period, how these variables change. That also need to be analyzed. So in macroeconomics, simply we say we look at the overall economy. We analyze the behavior of economic aggregates and the averages. So when we explain, when we analyze all these things, we look at the causal factors, that mean what determine the macroeconomic variable and what kind of relationship is there and how these variables change over the time. Right? So that is the macroeconomic analysis. Okay, is it clear? Right. So then the macro, those are the Latin words, right? Micro, macro, all these things are Latin words. Right? Macro means like we use them all, like something like large, right? We look at the economy as a whole. It's a telescope view, right? Not the telescope, you use the satellite, right? If you use the telescope, it's a micro. You look at the close surroundings. If you want to look at in a deeper way, right? So large area, right? And space, no, right? We use a satellite. That's a kind of macroeconomic, right? Macro, right? So then basically, as we mentioned, we analyze the economy as a whole by looking at the behavior of the macroeconomic aggregates and the averages. Right, now these are the things. Now, if you look at our growth rate, per capita income growth rate, how much is our per capita income? 1,600, right? Right. Now, the economic growth is how much? We had a negative growth, right? And that is not the first time we had the negative growth. In the history, we had another one time we had the negative growth. 2001, right? So if you look at the GDP, so this is the overall economy, national output, right? Right. Gross domestic product, right? For national product, how it is made over the time. So that is one aspect that we look at over the time period, how these the variables change, right? So then we can see, we can predict the behavior, long term. We can trend line, we can fit all this, right? Average, how much? We can figure the trend line, right? So that actually explain the potential outlook or something, right? The actual outlook. We pick the trend line, so that will be the potential output level. Sustainable output level over the longer period, right? Now you look at this, the behavior of the GDP, economic growth rate, right? Real GDP, this is called real GDP, right? In real terms, right? Now we see in 1970s what happened? It decreased because of the policies. No, we had a outward or inward looking policies, closed economic policies, right? We had a closed economic policy, right? In 1970s, we had a rigid control, right? Before 1960s, we had somewhat relaxed partial liberalization policy, but when it come to the 1970s, from 70 to 77, we had a closed economic policy regime, right? Under the Sirima Bandaranaike government, the selective government. Right? So at that time, the growth increased, right? Because of the policy problems, right? How people not ready to accept those policy changes, no, right? Because there are no huge there, right? Problems, shortage of products, right? Okay, then how to do at least that time. When we opened up, right? 1977, 78, right? So we opened the economy. We introduced some liberalization policies, no, right? Structural adjustment policies, right? With a view to market orientation, private sector orientation, no, right? Some kind of policies, no, right? Open economic policy. 1977, once it is introduced, growth rate accelerate, no, right? With the relaxations, right? But later on, time to time, this growth rate change, no, right? When it comes to the 1980s, what happened? 89. We had a somewhat lower growth rate, no, right? 88, 89. What is the reason? Because of the political unrest, no, right? During both there are like either attacks, and the immediately start like terrorist case, but when it comes to 89 and the JVP movement also there, civil unrest. Like, the time I remember so problems there, right? Because of the civil unrest, right? Maybe you know, right? We come to the top level in 1989, right? Aliens destroying the infrastructure something. Right? So that's why the political uncertainty is there, right? For mentioned, right? Because of that, political instability is there. So the growth rate increased, right? But after 1990s, especially in 1989 to 94, there is a Vedas scheme, right? We only can bread and butter reform, some relaxation introduced, right? Private sector is power generation program, Janasarya, like by something like that. So that was somewhat good period to the foreign investments, right? But later on, again, when it comes to the 2001, right? What happened? Running because, you know, like, it is like, so that actually happened negative growth rate because of the crisis, world economy, right? World economic crisis, right? So we also had to use some strict controls, right? That, right? So long introduced with the fiscal management act also, right? At that time, but we had a negative growth rate, right? Because of these external factors, right? Yeah, so, right? External, right? So the later on we see that the 2005, the somewhat growth like say, then the race actually 2005, 95, for the Chandigarh median and 2009, no, right? So, function, there are possibilities, right? The rules not to be had some kind of possibility, right? But that was not happen, right? The performance, right? So you know, the government are limited like you see there, those who work for policies, you know, that is so policies is not. So see that period, right? Punctuation is the way people, yeah. But after 2019, 20, you know, there is a negative growth rate again because of this corona, right? And the financial crisis. So the crisis, right? We had a negative growth rate in 2020, right? And it was further accelerated the latter part in 2022, right? Likewise, right? So when you look at these fluctuations in the GDP, right? As a macro variable, right? You can understand the social factors that goes to create such a situation, policy factors, right? And the environmental factors, right? And the economic factors, how it is contributed, right? To these things and then identify the determinants of what determines the output and so on, right? And we see how it is changed over the time period, right? And even with that past data, we can predict the future also. Behaviors as well. Now, this is the another one, right? Average growth rate, now you can see 1960s, 4.6. 70 is 3.9, but I 80 is 14.3, right? 90 is so somewhat good, right? 5.3. So therefore, again, it's decreased. So now, overall, 1972 to 2007, we had a average growth rate 4.9. Is that 5%? So this growth rate is not sufficient. Thank you. Right? But of the lower growth, right? Even though now after 77, how many years, how many decades we passed, right? We introduced so much of reforms, right? So much of relaxations, right? But we were not able to achieve the faster growth rate. Since there's an average growth rate is 4.9. That is not sufficient to address the major macroeconomic problem. Right? Growth needs to be accelerated in order to solve the problems, right? Output, right? So now we have the policies also you can see this one restrictive policy before 1970. This open economic policy, right? And recent time we see some government interventions, not right? The economy, right? To activities after this 2009 something, right? More fewer fiscal policies, right? And involvement in economic activities, right? So what is it? Address the problems, right? So you can see the growth rate, right? That is not encouraged, encouraged. We had a lower growth rate of the period. So that's the problem we have, right? Since that's why we need to accelerate the growth potentials of the time, right? Okay. Now the depth also, right? Now you can observe all these things. No? Those are the macro variables, no? Right? How these variables change, what kind of factors force to change the behavior of these variables. So that is the purpose of studying the macroeconomics, no? Right? We are going to analyze the overall macroeconomic variables and their behaviors, no? Right? So the depth also we see, right? So this change time, right? Of inflation, we see like fluctuations, right? Especially now with the compared with the liberalization of 1970, inflation and pressure we see most of the years. Right? But that is inflation, right? So that's why we need to stabilize it. Likewise, right? Other thing is if you look at the structure of the economy, right? So that's also very much important. Different sectors, right? How it is contributed to the economy. Now, 1950, now we are saying our economy is predominantly agriculture economy. Right? Right. So agriculture based economy, but we have to be problem now, right? So the contribution of the agriculture sector is 9%. Mandi with the right? Because right? To compare 1950s at the independence, it contribute more than 50%, right? So gradually the contribution from the agricultural sector increased, right? With the industrialization strategy, right? That we used after 1977, right? So 77 is 31%, 77, right? Our manufacturing sector, second sector contributed when from 1977 to 88%. Now it is 26%, even though we introduced this export-oriented industrialization, right? We introduced so much of the concessions, holidays, tax holidays, attract foreign investments, the manufacturing sector, no, right? Still, the industrial sector is not highly contributed, right? But we have the service sector, right? Gradually increased, right? Contributing 65%, right? Now, normally the economy should be the it's like a pyramid, no, right? Well structured agriculture sector, manufacturing, service, no, right? Like this, no? It's stable, but there should be a agriculture sector provide the base for the economy, no, right? Now this is other way around. Agriculture sector, manufacturing is a other way around. The economic pyramid, no? This is not stable. Right? This is not stable. Not stable. Not stable. This is the stable economy. There should be agriculture base, no, right, for the economy. Right? Contribution coming from the agriculture sector must be right. Right? Normally, the agriculture sector must provide the forward and the backward leakages, right? Links should be there, right? With the manufacturing sector and the service sector, right? Right. But we cannot see those things, right? And the problem in the economic structure as well, right? Right. Okay. So that's about the macroeconomy, right? So now you get some understanding what we are analyzing, no? Economy, overall economy. We analyze the major variables, right? So macroeconomic variables, in other words, macroeconomic aggregates and their averages and their behavior and the relationships we can look at, right? We need a break. Can take 3 minutes break, right? Start after the break. Any questions? Now the economics, macroeconomics, it's very enjoyable to listen, no? Right? Even the history of economics, right? So that is very interesting to listen. But when you have the questions in the examination, matters are very difficult, right? So that's the case. Right? Okay, you can take 3 minutes break. After the break, we will start at 3, right? New ones. You are listed in this. It's not new. And I uploaded the you listed the LX. Your name is not there. Today? Yes. Updated one. Okay. In the attendance sheets, I got the list of registered students from the office. It is not me. So in this type, you need to inform me, right? Then I will inform my side to the group, right? Your names are available. Sorry. Oh, kita So we can check in the limits of silence, both in the view, with the view. Whether you are there with the other means, whether are they visible, you have to take the otherwise you will tell me I will escape to the visible route. Because students are not there, I don't know whether they following my group works. Otherwise, you have to do the group assignment. So, you know, correct. So, there will be a problem. Then tell me, I will allocate, reallocate, reallocate. Forms.
It's
It's not a you can write it there. You can sign, you can write it there, sign. So tell me you can send me the message. I can get the WhatsApp. Send me the message. I will give it Text message or WhatsApp. Oh, how many students are there? 32. You are the last one. 34. I got only 30 students in the group list from the office. That mentioned only 30 students. Now you are attached to the specific group, market group attached to the particular group. No, no. In our group, do you have any preference to join with the group? Huh? D. D එක වැඩි දැන් කට්ටිය. එක්කෙනෙක් වැඩි කරත් එහෙම. You also group D, right? So then there will be an imbalance in the group, right? We'll assign you for any other. So we have the other student now we need to start the session. Okay, I'll start the session, right? Now we talk about this macroeconomics, right? Basically, how you have a kind of understanding about the macroeconomic, the way of macroeconomics is going on, right? Since we look at the macro variables and their behavior, right? And then we look at the overall economic behavior, right? Now, when you look at the history of macroeconomics, right? So the macroeconomics started from the revolutionary book, right? Published by the John Maynard Keynes, right? So that is the book published by the invented by the John Maynard Keynes, right? James Keynes, right? Actually, he actually wrote this book to address the problems prevailed in 1920s and 30s, especially after 1929. There was a great depression, right? 1929. There was a great depression in the world economy, right? So, like we mentioned, recession, no? Right? Downturn in the economic activities. So, actually, before 1936, actually, in 1920s even, right? So, like we discussed, most of the economics talk about the microeconomics concept, right? So, they analyze the things, the problems based on the microeconomic analysis. For an example, that's why now, starting from the 1776, Adam Smith, no, right? Who is the father of economics? Adam Smith, no, right? 1776, he invented a new book, right? So that is called Wealth of Nation, right? Wealth of Nation, Adam Smith, right? From that onward, right? Different economics talk about the microeconomics concepts, right? Analysis. For an example, Alfred Marshall, no, right? This demand curve and the big U, right? JBC, no, right? So JS mean, right? So those economics basically look at we call it as classical economics, right? So basically they talk about the microeconomics concept, right? So analyze the economy based on the microeconomics point of view. But the first time with this general theory, John Maynard Keynes, right, introduced the book, right? So that is called General Theory of Employment, Interest and Money, right? You can read this book, right? So that is simply we say general theory, right? So that from that invention, right, he analyzed the overall economy, right, first time, right? So he actually developed a model that talk about the income determination, right? Model of income determination. That the things model of income determination, right? through that, he tried to explain the overall economic behavior, right, by analyzing the demand side. Demand side. Now, we know that we have two sides, demand side and the supply side. Economics also, we divided into demand side economics, supply side economics, no? Right? Likewise, two branches. So some economics, they talk about the demand side analysis, demand side factors. Some economists talk about the supply side factors. Now, for an example, Arthur Lewis, you may have the Laffer curve, right? Explain this tax effect, right? So the effective range of the tax effect, right? Normally when there is an increase in the tax, right? The tax rate at the initially the government can raise the revenue, but when it increases to the particular level, after the threshold level, there may be a decline in the government revenue. Because high tax rate, at the high tax rate, people actually resist, right? Because they have to pay more, right? So they are not, do not like to work more hours, right? Because if they work more hours, they have to pay more tax, right? So that actually reduce the labor supply. So if there is a reduction in labor supply, that will affect to the output as well, right? So that's kind of supply side analysis, no? Right? Now, most of the classical economics, right? So demand side and the supply side. So the classical economics, they talk about the importance of the supply side factors. Right? Now, this, for an example, Adam Smith, no? Right? So he explained, like, he explained the how the productive capacity of the economy is determined based on the factors of production and the technology. Right? Wealth depends on the resource base of the country, no? Right? So that actually explains the supply side factors, right? So we have the classical theory, right? We talk about the classical theory, right? So that highlights the importance of the supply side factors in determining output, employment, price level, and so on. Right? But in the very first time, the case, through his model of income determination, explain the importance of the demand side factors, criticizing this classical economics, right? Now we know that when we talk about the earlier, you may remember we talk about schools of economics. No? Started from mercantilism, no? Right? Mercantilism. Then the classical economics, no? Right? Then the Keynesian economics, right? This classical economics criticize their views, they develop against the mercantilist ideas. See, that was prevailing in 16th, 17th centuries. So really, classical economics will highlight the importance of the supply side factors, right? Against the mercantilist ideas, right? And the Keynes criticize the classical economic because these classical ideas not successful, right? At the prevailing situation at that time in 1920s, because there is a downturn in economic activities. Supply side policies not effective because even after the World War situation, right, all the countries collapsed, right? Then actually during that time we highlighted the importance of this increase in the production, right, resources and so on, because there is a destroying the infrastructure facilities, all the countries, right, rebuilding the economy, right. So that's why this World Bank, IMF, those Bretton Woods twins, right? Bretton Woods, as a result of this Bretton Woods agreement, these two organizations formed, right? To reconstruct the world, right? World Bank and the IMF also as a part of that, right? As a Bretton Woods agreement, right? So that basically during that period, most of the ideas developed classical economics, right? How to increase the output, by increasing the productive capacity of the technology, right? Likewise, increasing the capital, right? Because capital destroyed, right? Most of the countries because of the war, right? So therefore, those economics highlight the importance of the capital investment, right? And the technology, labor, right? So those are supply side factors, factors of production, right? But later on, because of this, the first time the Keynes introduced these demand side factors, demand side. One side factors are the risk consumption, investment, government expenditure, no, right? Now we highlight the importance of the government expenditure, fiscal policy action, basically, right? So if there is a problem in the investment, no, right? Because private sector investment, we know highly volatile, no, right? There can be a sudden reversal of private investment in crisis situation, no, right? They withdraw and go, no, right? So that affects the private investment crisis, right? If there is a uncertainty, risky side, no, private investors, they are not willing to invest, no, they wait and see, no, right? Now that is happening, right? People are not willing to invest, no, right? Because of this uncertainty, risk, no, right? Right. So under that situation, government intervention is very much important, right? Through the fiscal policy actions, government must raise the expenditure in order to increase the aggregate demand, right? When there is a demand, that eventually increase the supply side factors, right? That's highlighted by the Keynesian theory. So the demand management policies, fiscal policy actions, no, right? So that's why last time also under the COVID situation, no, right? We talk about this demand management policies, no, right? Government interventions, no, right? Pumping money, no, right, to the economy, no. But really recently also we print money, no, that's no, right, under the new monetary management, no, right? So that actually create inflation now. Even though now there's a, with the, when we raise the government expenditure, that is inflation, no, right? But that will address under certain situations. If there is a crisis situation because of the demand side factors, because is identified in 1920, 20, 22, 22, 29, right? Because of this depression, right? Crisis, it will arise because of the inadequate demand, right? There is a inadequacy of the demand. But the problem is the demand side. So we need to accelerate the demand. So that's why Keynes proposed demand management policies with the intervention of the government, fiscal policy actions. So that is the case, right? We identify. Keynes highlight the importance of the demand side factors to determine output or employment. So is the model of income determination that we are going to talk about, right? Some of the things, right? So aggregate demand, no, right? Aggregate demand, like effective demand, no, right? So how we increase the aggregate demand, right? So that is right? So that is the model developed by the Keynes, right? In order to address the problems prevailed at that time in 1920s, right? So that actually model is very truthful, right? In order to address the problems in 1920s. So that's why it's called Keynesian revolution, right? Keynesian revolution. Because earlier the supply side economics, classical economics highlight the importance of supply side factors in determining output, no, right? So that goes to create classical revolution because they have the problem in the supply side because after the war, right? We need to increase the output, no? So that's why we need to raise the factors of production, no, productive resources, technology, no, right? So that create classical revolution at that time, right? So now that is one thing we know that the supply takes its own demand according to classical. Supply takes its own demand. But this is explained under the classical economics, no, right? Sambhavayati activity, ATK, according to phase flow. Phase flow, right? Supply creates its own demand. Problem is the supply. If there is a supply, that will eventually create the demand. නිෂ්පාදනයක් තියෙනවනේ ඒ සඳහා ඉල්ලුමකුත් තියෙනවා කියලා කියනවා, right? නිෂ්පාදනය කරන්න ඕනේ වැඩි වැඩි. So we can create the demand for such products, right? The problem is the supply at that time. So that is the main ideology of the classical economics, right? Supply creates its own demand. This is called says law. Says law. Supply creates its own demand. Right? But this ideology changed with the development of this Keynesian theory. That was basically talk about the demand side factors because classical economics highlight them. They identify the importance of the market, pure market. No, now we talk about earlier demand supply model, no, right? That's classical economics, Martian demand curve, no, like Alfred Martian, no, right? So there we believe we assume the perfect combination, no, market is there, purely operate according to the demand and supply process without any government intervention. So that is the assumption. Classical belief government sector is inefficient. There should be a market. If there is a market, resource allocation is efficient. There is no problem created. That means there is no excess demand, excess supply, and so on. No? Resources will be allocated efficiently, and market is always clear because price is determined according to the market forces, no? Right? So that we discussed earlier, no? What the demand supply equilibrium analysis. That is part of classical economics. Right? So that is the supply gives on demand, right? Right, but what happened, right? Now, with the demand, with the Keynesian theory, he explained that government intervention in the economy, but classical economy rejected the government intervention in the economy. Right? They highlight the importance of market forces without any government intervention. So that is the difference, right? But Keynes highlighting government intervention in the economy. See, there is a problem with the demand side, you know, aggregate demand must raise, right? In order to raise the aggregate demand, there should be a government. Government should raise the expenditure, no, right? Because the private sector is in a problem, right? Because of the prices, right? Private investment is lower, no, right? Lower private investment, no, right? So there should be a government in order to correct the weaknesses in the economy. So that's the way, like the demand management policies, right? So, right. So that is the general theory, right? So this is the starting point of the macroeconomics after 1936 with the introduction of this general theory. So people or economics talk about the macroeconomics. They look at the overall economy instead of the by looking at the consumer, the producer, individual aspects. Right? So that the first time, so macroeconomics, we look at the macroeconomic, we are trying to look at the economy using the macroeconomic eye, no? Right? In this theory. So we can believe that Keynes is the father of macroeconomics, right? Keynes died in 1957, right? But his followers continue his ideas. Right? Okay, right? Right. So then, so we identify the major macro variables, right? So those are the basic macro variables, right? Now, how in the macroeconomics, how we identify the overall economy based on the set of macro variables. So those variables are we call it as major variables, right? So the consumption, investment, money demand, money supply, saving, right? So the consumption is the major macro variable because from our income, we allocate significant part for the consumption, no? More than 80%, no? Right? 70%, no? We allocate for the consumption, right? So that means if we take the aggregate demand, right? So the demand side factor, no? Consumption, right? So for the aggregate demand, there is a significant impact from the consumption because the major part of your income allocated for the consumption. And we identify the investment, it is highly volatile component, that is the private investment, right? So highly volatile component with the activity. And the money demand, money supply, so those are the money factors, monetary factors, no, right? So that also identified as major macro variables. No? And the saving is the other side of the consumption because from our income, part of our income consumed, no, right? We take from our income in the Y, right? Part of our income consume, other part save, no? Y equals C plus S, no, right? How you allocate your income? Part of your income consume, other part save, no? Maybe you pay as taxes, so you can take that one also related with that, right? So this is the main one, right? S means we can write it y minus c, no, right? Savings, S is the savings, no, right? Y minus c. Y is the income minus c, no, right? That is the savings. So savings also part of that, right? We can take, right? So that's also major variable, no, right? Now, if we take this consumption, investment, savings, right? So those are the now economy we identified totally two sectors, right? One sector is the monetary sector, one sector is the real sector. Other one is the monetary sector. Monetary sector, right? So the two sectors, no? Even though we identify the economy as a set of macro variable, if we identify the economy, one part it represents the real sector, other part is it represents the financial sector or the monetary sector, right? Real sector and the monetary sector. Now, real sector variables, consumption, investment, savings, no, right? So those are the consumption, investment, savings. So those are the real sector variables, no, right? Monetary sector or the financial sector means money demand and the money supply, right? Right. So those are the monetary variables, right? So economy, when you analyze the overall economy, broadly we can identify the real sector, that's the goods market and the money market, no, right? Goods market and the money market, right? So the real sector represents the goods market, no, right? Monetary sector represents money market, right? And there is an interaction, no, right? When you talk about this overall economic behavior, so there is an interaction between the real sector and the monetary sector, right? When we explain the overall economy. So that needs to be analyzed when we talk about the equilibrium in the overall economy, right? Real sector and the monetary. With the interaction of the real sector and the monetary sector, no, right? We can explain the overall economic behavior. And also the equilibrium in the economy can be explained using the involvement of the real sector and the monetary sector. So there is a real sector equilibrium, monetary sector equilibrium. At a particular point, both sectors come to the equilibrium at a particular income level and the interest rate, right? That we need to identify, that is the macroeconomic equilibrium, right? Now, real sector equilibrium, how we explain the income, right? Monetary sector equilibrium that determines the interest rate, right? So there is interaction between the income and the interest rate, right? So that explains the interaction between the real sector and the monetary sector, right? So that ISLN model, right? We explain this interaction, right? But the Keynesian theory only look at this real sector only, not the monetary sector. Keynes talk about the money factors, money demand, right? But when we explain the behavior of the real sector and the monetary sector, right? It does not incorporate the monetary sector into the analysis. Because in Keynesian aggregate demand, right? Maybe equals C plus I plus G, no, right? Or X minus N, export and import. This is aggregate demand model, right? Hence, level of aggregate demand pricing, consumption, investment, carbon expenditure, export and import, right? Here we talk about these variables, right? Investment, right? Depends on the interest rate and so on, but this government expenditure, those are the government expenditure of goods and service. But it's important to explain how this expenditure is going to be financed. So that means monetary sector involved does not analyze in this model. It's a Keynesian analysis, one sector analysis to explain the real sector only. Right? Focus on the single sector, focus on oriented on the real sector only, right? But monetary sector involvements not taken into account. So that is not realistic model, Bayesian model, right? So that's why we need to find out more realistic model. So that was developed by Hicks, J.R. Hicks, no, right? ISLM model with the interaction of the real sector and the monetary sector, right? So we will talk about that one later, right? Now, for the time being, we identify these macro variables. Right? So based on these macro variable, we identify the overall economy. Right? So this is the way of economy is designed. Right? With the consumption, investment, government expenditure, and money demand, money supply, savings, like that. Right? Okay. We identify the economy based on these variables. Right? Now, when we talk about, I mentioned the scope of macroeconomics. What is the subject area? Basically, we talk about two things. One thing is economic analyze the economy. It's a kind of economic analysis. What we are going to analyze? We analyze the behavior of the major macro variables based on graphical analysis, statistical analysis, trend analysis, no, right? Forecasting techniques, no, right? Yeah. And also, we analyze the determinants of the different macro variables. How the consumption is determined, how the investment is determined, how the government expenditure is determined, like that. And the trends, how these variables are behave over the time. Right? And we try to identify the relations, causal relationship, each and every macro variables. So that's the kind of analysis we do there, right? That's the one part of it, right? Other part is the politics. So that is the more focus on the policies. Right? We talk about the policy impacts, right? So these macro variables, under the economic analysis, we discuss the macroeconomic variables, behavior. Right? So those behavior controlled by the macro variables, macroeconomic policies. So if you want to change the behavior of the macro variable, consumption, investment, government expenditure, or national output, national expenditure, no, right? So we need to use the macro policies in appropriate way. Different policies, maybe the monetary policy, fiscal policy, commercial policy, trade policy, no, right? We need to use different things in order to control this macro variable. Because our purpose is to achieve the economic objectives, no, right? What are the economic objectives? We mentioned economic growth and development, right? Stability, right? Full employment, right? Reducing poverty. Those are the economic objectives, right? In order to achieve the economic objectives, so we need to analyze the macro variables, right? And we need to manage those macro variables in appropriate manner, no, right? Using the macroeconomic policies with the view to achieving the macroeconomic objective. Right. So policies we need to control the macroeconomic variables in appropriate way, right? To change their behavior, right? Then we can see how we can control these variables using the policies in order to achieve the macroeconomic objectives, right? So that's policies. Economic policies is the other part of the economic macroeconomic analysis, right? So we cover two areas: economic analysis and economic policies. Okay. So because policies we need to control the macro variables in appropriate manner, right? Without policies, we cannot control the macro variables, right? So those policies we highlighted as fiscal, monetary, no? Basically, fiscal policies control the government expenditure, revenue, no, right? And the taxes, no, right? Monetary policy will control the money supply, interest rate, no, right? And so on. So then we have the exchange rate policy that controls the exchange rate, no, likewise, no, right? So we need the such policies in order to control the those macro variables, right? Macro variables. Finally, we are going to the final objective. Right? So that is the scope of the macroeconomics. Okay. And there are the economic analysis and the policies, these are the areas. So those are the part of the economic objectives that we are having, right? So we control the output, right? As a macro variable, right? So economic analysis and the policies, we talk about, we analyze the output, right? Policies, we talk about how we control the output, how we reach the higher growth rate, no, right? Yeah. How we are reaching the higher growth rate, we need to design the appropriate policies to accelerate the growth potentials of the country, no, right? And the consumption investment we can change, no, right? And the exchange rate, trade balance, so those are the variables And other side, it explains macroeconomic objectives as said, maybe the internal objectives or external. Internal objective means what are internal objectives? I grow, I employ, I stability, right? External objective means balance of payments, exchange rate, right? So in order to achieve all these things, right? So we need to analyze and we need to put policies, right? In order to achieve. So the interest rate, government budget, money supply, all these things we analyze, and the policy is also focused on those variables. Right? Those are the economic aggregates and the averages, in other words. Right? Okay. So these are the goals. Right? Economic goal is final goal, as we mentioned, material well-being. No? Right? Can you remember we mentioned material well-being? That is the final objective of economics, right? We say the economics, right? So economics, we have two branches, microeconomics and macroeconomics, right? So the final objective is material well-being. Do you agree? Material well-being, no, right? What is the that is the main objective, no, right? Material well-being means how we improve the living standard of the people, no, right? So that we talk about, no, right? We have a study finally should improve the living condition, no, right? Living standard. කොහොමද භෞතික සුබ සාධනය වැඩි කරන්නේ, welfare, no, right? Right? How we improve the welfare of the public, no, right? So that is the final objective of economics. So now we have two branches, no, as we mentioned. One thing is microeconomics, as we discussed earlier, no, right? And the other one is macroeconomics, no, right? Right? So in microeconomics, that also focuses on the material well-being, no, right? Macroeconomics also focuses on, as a branch of economics, traditionally we divide micro, macro, material well-being. But the approach is different. What is the approach of microeconomics? With the first thing I know, I mentioned only the difference between micro and macroeconomics, right? But here, microeconomics, what we talk about? Now you talk about the consumer producer, no? How they allocate resources, no? Right? So we talk about the optimal allocation of resources. Now the basically in the two way, how the consumer produces, no, right? No? Consumer utility theory, we talk about now, right? Talk about how the consumer allocates limited income, right? Indifference curve analysis, no, right? And so the same thing, no, right? How the consumer allocates limited income under the budget constraint and so on, no, right? Budget time to talk about it, no, right? Utility theory. So this is the consumer behavior, theory of consumer behavior. Consumer behavior. We talk about under the theory of consumer behavior and the producer behavior under the theory of the firm. We will talk about under the business economics part more on this, no, right? Cost, revenue, all this, right? Under the theory of the firm. Theory of cost, theory of revenue, theory of profit, no, right? All these things we will talk about later, right? So under business economics that will come, right? Theory of the firm, right? How the producer maximize profits, minimize cost, and so on. Right? What is the combination of labor and the capital? How the producer incorporate labor and the capital in appropriate manner in order to achieve the maximum profit, in order to minimize the cost. The theory from that. All these things explain how the consumer and the producer allocate this limited resource, scarce resource, no, right? In order to achieve their respective goals, right? So that is the optimum allocation of resources, right? We talk about based on the theory. So finally, it's for focus on the material well-being. No, that is here we talk about the equilibrium. We also need to talk about the equilibrium, consumer equilibrium, right? How we maximize this utility at a particular point by consuming bundle of goods. At a particular point, consumer producer also maximize his profit by utilizing the labor and the capital in optimum manner, right? Such a way which minimize the cost. So that finally we will talk about the material well-being. Right? Here microeconomics we talk about the welfare aspect also, right? So that will cover, right, under that optimum allocation of resources. Right? But when it comes to the macroeconomics, here we talk about not the optimum allocation of resources, we see our overall economy, talk about the full employment. Full employment. Full employment is the situation where we utilize all the factors of production in maximum possible manner, right? Efficient way, right? So that is the point where we produce at the point on the PPC, right? At a particular point. Economic efficiency is there, right? Resource allocation also efficient, right? So then talk about the macroeconomics in our overall economy, right? Finally, macro should focus on the material. Right? So the economic goal, here now we talk about theories, classical theory. We assume the classical theory. We are not talking about Keynesian theory, monetarism, right? Those things, right? Theoretical things we talk about. Right? So let's also talk about how the output, all these theories talk about how we determine the output, employment, price level, exchange rate, and so on, right? Equilibrium. That actually a particular point that talk about the full employment, right? So how we reach to the full employment output level, right? So, basically, economy always prevail full employment, right? Because they believe the market, right? They believe the market. So always economy is in full employment, right? Ancient economy, since there is a deficiency in the aggregate demand, that talk about how we reach to the full employment output level from the actual output. Actual output level is below the full employment, since there is a deficiency in aggregate demand, right? So it talk about how we reach to the full employment output level through demand management policy, likewise, right? So anyway, all these theories here, the tool is used basically the full employment, right? So it's basically talk about the full employment, right? And finally focus on this. So even though the two branches in economics, their approach is different, right? But they are focusing on the common objective, right? So that is material well-being, right? So in we have the two branches, it's explained, right? So finally focus on the common objective. So that is the economic objective, right? Material. Is it clear? Okay. Right. Now, we are not right? So, it's because I want to be listed, right? So, otherwise, if you are able to explain, I have to start with topic, right? So, if you have any question, you can take, right? So, I want to, right? About next day, if you have any question, you need to refer and come, right? Then, if there are questions, you can raise. So, we can talk after the class, right? We're not doing on the like I feel like what right. We have time after class, right? We have no lectures, right? We have enough time. It's good for me. Morning, we have limited time, right? So better if you refer the material and if you come next day, if you have a problem, you can raise those things, right? Otherwise, there will be no opportunity for you to discuss with me. Right. So the macroeconomic objectives, right? So we have the objectives, right? So what we are trying to achieve. One thing is the economic growth and development. Right? We will talk about how these topics are there. Some of the topics are there. Right? You are consumer, right? Economic growth, development, and the poverty growth things. Right? I will give you a supplementary note for that. You can refer those things, right? Because I assume that we have done the things, right? Economic growth and quality, right? Development foundation, right? For these things, power is something is right. Right. I will need to be more than you can do. I am not going to solve these things. Okay. And the growth and development, right? So those are the two things, right? Growth and development, right? But in 1970s, before 1970s, economics really growth and development is same person. Okay. This concept is no concept identified as a different concept after 1970s, right? So because they look at the quantitative aspect and the quantitative aspect. Growth refers to the quantitative development, right? Whereas development refers to the qualitative development, no, right? So that actually explains multidimensional factors, no, right? So that is the one objective, right? Right. So the growth is the economic growth is the quantitative development, increase in the real GDP, no, right? Right? Real GDP or GDP, right? Over a period. Right? And also we talk about the full employment, no, right? So we are trying to reach to the full employment level, right? So that is one objective, right? So we need to utilize these resources, no, right? Land, labor, capital, entrepreneurship, and the technology, no, right? At their full potential level, no, right? But when we are talking the full employment, that does not explain fully consumed, no, right? Without saving for the future generation, no, right? So we talk about the sustainable development, so that's sustainability, no, right? So that means we need to keep certain resources for the future generation as well. Keeping such resources for the future generation, we need to utilize the resources at their full efficient way, right? In order to reach to the maximum productive capacity, right? And also the stability. Stability means maintaining stable prices, right? So stability are two forms, right? So stability we can discuss in two forms, right? One is the internal stability, other one is the external stability. Because there is a problem, no, right? Internal stability and the external. Now also you see, right? Sometimes both working, no, right? Internal and the external, both stabilities we cannot achieve, right? Sometimes when you are trying to achieve the internal stability, it may worsen the external stability, no, right? When you are trying to achieve the inflation, no, control the inflation, no, right? So that may affect the external stability as well, no, right? Right. So likewise, no, right? So we need to manage the internal stability and the external stability. Sometimes we call it as internal equilibrium, external equilibrium, right? Same thing, right? So the prices of goods and service, that is the inflation, no? Average price of goods and service, right? So that is a part of internal stability, right? Right. Price of money in the loanable fund, what is that? So that is the interest rate, no, right? So that also internal stability variable, right? We need to maintain stable interest rate, right? We need to manage the interest rate, no, right? If the interest rate is very high, that will affect to the investment, private investment, right? High interest rate means lower projects will be viable, no, right? Because high cost of capital, right? So you know that, right? So when there is high cost of capital, that will affect to the net present value or payback period if you calculate, no, right? Discounting factor, no, as a discounting factor. No? So that affect to the project viability, no, right? High interest rate, most of the projects are not viable, no, right? So that means investment discouraged, no, right? At higher interest rate. Right? So we also believe in economics, no, right? Interest rate investment depends on the interest rate. Interest rate. So the investment I is a function of interest rate. So there's a negative relationship. Higher the interest rate, lower investment, right? Negative relationship. Right? Those high cost of capital, right? So that is also a stability variable, right? Interest rate. And the price of foreign currency, that is the exchange rate, external stability. So we need to maintain the stability, right? So that is very, very important macroeconomic variable. When we talk about the macroeconomic stability, right? So, macroeconomic environment, right? We need to maintain the stability of prices, right? Okay. So that is the one objective, right? Stability. And there are other, maybe the objectives, right? For an example, poverty, right? Regional development, right? Those are the other objectives, right? We need to eradicate the poverty, right? And we need to reduce the income disparity, right? And we need to accelerate the regional development, right? Likewise, right? There may be other objectives. Apart from that, main objectives are this growth, right? Employment, full employment, and this, right? So these are the macroeconomic objectives. In order to achieve these objectives, we need to manage the macro variables, right? So like we mentioned earlier, we need to manage the macro variables using the macroeconomic policies. Sometimes single policies, sometimes mix of policies we have to use in order to manage macro variables in order to achieve these objectives, right? Now, when you talk about the monetary policy, there is a monetary policy transmission mechanism we talk, right? So transmission mechanism means once we introduce the monetary policy, either contractionary or expansionary monetary policy, how it is affect the finally this macroeconomic objectives, right? Through which way, what are the channels of mechanism, monetary policy over these macroeconomic objectives, right? So how it is forced, right? So there may be in between that, but there may be different factors, asset pricing like that, different factors affect. Right. So that is the macroeconomic objectives and macroeconomic issues also, right? So we talk about our macroeconomic issues, major macroeconomic problems, right? So if we talk about this growth problem, right? Lower growth, unemployment, inflation, poverty, right? There are sustainable problems, right? So if we analyze those problems, these problems directly or indirectly related with the output, production, right? Because of the lower production, this may arise, right? These problems. If there is a lower production, that may lower income, right? That may affect the lower investment, lower savings, right? Right. Lower capital accumulation, likewise, all these problems create lower employment, right? Because of the inadequacy of the output production. Therefore, we need to look at the productive capacity of the economy, right? So we need to increase the productive capacity of the economy. That also explains this VCP, right? What is VCP? VCS circle of power, right? You heard about VCP? Right? Like we mentioned, right? So there's a circle, right? That arises because of this growth, global growth, global income. Right? So we need to manage, control these things, right? Through the policies. Right. Now this is the case, right? Lower income, power, lower output, right? Lower output, lower income. If there is a lower income, lower savings, right? Lower savings, if there are savings are mobilized for investments, right? Banks, what they do through their financial intermediation, attract more and more deposits, accumulate savings, pooling of savings, right? So that you pool utilize for different investment projects, right? So banks, grant, government, advance, credit, public, right? So that will increase the investment, right? So for different investment projects, right? If there is a lower savings, that will end up with lower investment, right? So lower investment means lower capital accumulation, right? Because capital is not accelerate with the investment. If you invest more and more projects, not like not different projects, it will accumulate the capital, right? So the lower capital means lower productivity, and the lower productivity, lower employment, again, lower output, right? So like that, you can see this circle, right? That's the problem arises with this lower income of output, right? We can address that one, right? We can go to other things, right? Things, okay. Right. So now we need to write. So then in the basic the problem is out, right? So behind that growth, right? And develop. Okay. So quantitative development, right? You can refer the supplemented for, right? We have this, right? So we talk about something in the economic growth earlier, right? Reducing the production, you talk about production facility curve, right? So if there is a shift in the PPC, to the rightward, that I will be economic growth. So when we go for higher productive capacity, right? Higher production level, that shift the PPC to the right. So that explains the economic growth. Right? So in order to achieve the growth, right? So we need to sacrifice current consumption for future investment. That is the opportunity cost, right? So we need to cut down the production of consumer goods and increase the production of investment goods or capital goods, right? So that is the opportunity cost of economic growth, right? We need to sacrifice the current consumption for future investments, right? Reduce the consumption and invest more, right? Reduce the consumption means save and investment, right? And the other cost, what are the other costs involved in economic growth? Maybe the quality of environment, right? We need to sacrifice the quality of environment. Right? We can cut down the Sinharaja forest, and increase the output, right? But environmental pollution, right? So those are some of the resources we have. We increase the output, right? If you use the non-renewable resources, right? So that may be the cost, right? Sacrificing the non-renewable resources, right? And the environment pollution, right? So those are the costs of doing that, right? You can think about, right? So the growth mainly can be achieved two ways, right? So basically, right? One is the expansion of resource base, right? So how we expand the resource base. So that means resource base expansion means from the DPC diagram, right? So using the resource base, right? If there is expansion of resource base, this shift, right? So that increase the resources, the factors of production and the technology, right? So if there is improvement of that, increase the resource base, our production capacity increase, right? Shifting implies that the productive capacity increase, right? So expansion of resources, right? So resources are the factors of production, right? Some factors are fixed in supply, right? But some factors we can increase, right? So for an example, land is fixed, right? But labor we can increase if there is a population increase, no, right? Labor can be increased. The productivity of labor also can be increased, no, right? Capital can be increased, no, right? Entrepreneurship, that's also can change. So if we expand the resource base, right, we can increase the productive capacity. The BPC, right? Right. And the other one is enhancement of productivity, no, right? So we increase the productivity, no, right? We can increase the resource base, no, right? Economic growth, right? So how we expand the resource base of the country? What are the ways and means of expanding resource base? Yes. How we expand the resources? Resource means we can do the research and development, right? To find new resources and so on, right? R&D, right? And we can use the foreign investments, no, right? Foreign investments. Foreign investments. Foreign investments, we know that one thing is, for example, foreign direct investment, FDI, right? So when you attract more and more foreign investment, foreign direct investment, it comes as a package, right? Package. Package argument is there. What is the package? Not only the money, no funds we receive, no, right? We receive the technology, we receive the skilled labor, no, right? We receive the management techniques, no, right? Likewise, no, right? With the foreign direct investments, right? So that actually increase the resource base, right? Right? Skilled labor, right? And the investments in monetary terms, right? So that is the argument, right? Package argument, right? FDI, foreign investment. If we attract more and more foreign investment, that increase the resource base. And the other thing is we can convert non-usable resources into usable state, no, right? So that will increase the resource base, no, right? One time when the JVP is in the with the government, no, right? So they use this. Can you remember? Sometimes you may remember, right? So this lakes, no, right? Parang වැව් එහෙම හදන්න ගත්තනේ, right? පොඩ වෙලා තමයි, right? So we can convert those things into usable state that increase the resource. So likewise, right? So we can expand the resource base. And the other one is enhancement of productivity. How we can improve the productivity? Efficiency. How we can improve? Productivity can be improved using the technology. We use the one technology, like we convert manual into the computerized, so they're using the technology, no, right? We can improve the productivity. And the other one, how we can increase the productivity? From the education, no, right? Once you educate, no, right? Become the, no, it's a part of the human capital, no, right? So you will improve the productivity as well, right? Training, and so that is training and development, no, right? That if you undergo more and more training projects, no, right? Right. And if you are in the managerial level, we will undergo the more development projects as well, no, right? So that increase the productivity, right? So education, training and development is other one is now specialization, no, right? And to the division of labor, no, right? So that also increase the productivity, no, right? But, they, right? So those are the ways, right? Can think about others, right? So basically, both we can achieve to the resource by increasing the resource base and enhancing the productivity. Right. But then we come to the business cycle. You may heard this word, no? Business cycle. What is meant by business cycle? Basically, explain the represent the uh, fluctuations of output, no? Like GDP around the long-term trend, right? Now, this is the output GDP, no, right? If you take the world output, what? This is the business, right? Here GDP, no, right? Fluctuations, right? So this is the actual output, right? Along the long-term trend, trend path. So the business cycle explain the fluctuations of the real GDP along the trend path, right? Right. So there we see the expansion of output and the contraction of output, right? And the peak point and the minimum point, right? So those are the what we see the phases, no, right? Different phases in the business cycle. Expansion, contraction, maximum point and the minimum point, right? So this is now based on this actual behavior, right? If we plot the trend line, right? So that explain this blue line explain the potential output, right? So the business cycle explain how the actual output departs from the potential output level, right? How it is fluctuating, departs over and below, right? From the potential output level. Now this is the potential output, right? So here we see the recession and the contraction, right? Recession means actual output is above the potential output level, right? So there we observe the recession. Right. Expansion, right? So expansion and explain actual output. The boundary potential output. Potential output. There is expansion, right? And the contraction means other way. If there is a decline in the, this is the contraction, no? Right? Right. That means the actual output is below the potential output level. Other way around, right? Relation. Fraction. Relation. Output is less than the potential output. Right? So there actually we see the potential output level is the, what is the potential output? So that is the long-term sustainable output level, right? So this is the blue line explain the potential output level, that is the long-term sustainable output level. We utilize all the resources and the technology, right? This area is gradually developed, right? Gradually increase, right? Because slowly increase the slowly, right? Actual output now we see the fluctuations, right? Right. But gradually increase the potential output level. Because that is the steady state output level, right? That is the steady state. Output potential output level, right? Long-term sustainable output level at the point when we utilize, the economies utilize resources and the technology at their full potential level, right? So we can see in the business cycle all these things, no? Recession, expansion, actual output, potential output, all these things. So in one business cycle, it explains from here to here. This is one business cycle. So over the time period, there may be a number of business cycles, right? So if we have the past explanations about the business cycle, so we can predict the future as well, right? Time to time in the world economy, experience these business cycles, and we can forecast the future business cycle as well based on that, right? Normally there is a same pattern, right? Will look like output increase and the decrease. Okay. Right. So that's about the business cycle, right? And associated with concepts like decision, expand, right? So actual output and potential output. So what is the difference between the actual output and the potential output? That is called output gap, right? Output gap. Difference between the actual output and the potential output. That is called output gap. So we need to minimize this output gap, right? Okay. Right. So that's about the business cycle, right? So then now we know the macroeconomic questions, right? So we have the basically macroeconomics look at the overall economy, right? So in the basically we are going to address the macroeconomic objectives, no, right? They actually explain. Basically we are going to look at how the output level is determined, how the employment level is determined, right? And how we achieve the price stability and so, right? So basically we look at one determined output. What factors determine the employment level? What factors determine the selling prices, right? All these theories that we talk about, right? Analyze how it determine the output level, employment, price level, and so on. Stability. When we talk about the classical theory, Keynesian theory, monetarism, right? Let's talk about the determination of output, employment, price level, so on. But when you talk about these determinants, right? How those factors are determined, right? Output, employment, price level, right? So we need to look at the different market as well. In macroeconomics, right? We have to look at the different markets. Market we identify as goods market. Almost we have the money market, right? Foreign exchange market, right? Because when you talk about the determination of output, employment, price level, so it's associated with the market, right? Because real and the monetary flows occurred in the market, right? This market, right? So we talk about how the price is determined there, right? Right. So there is the real and monetary sector involvement. Even in the money market, money demand, money supply, right? Market, the demand and supply is the demand and the supply. That is actually we talk about the aggregate demand and the aggregate supply. How the average price is determined, right? The goods market, right? And the money market, we take the loanable funds, demand and supply, or money demand and the money supply. There we talk about how the interest rate is determined, right? Market now here, what is the analytical tool that we use in macroeconomics? We use the aggregate demand, aggregate supply, right? That is the analytical tool, right? So we have to decide equilibrium in the ADA's model. This is the price level and the national income, right? Why? Right? Why is the national income, right? And the P is the general price level. The price of the particular product, general price. Here the price, we don't, what is the price level? Inflation. Here the equilibrium income, right? And the intersection point of the aggregate demand and the aggregate supply, right? So this explains the goods market, right? Real sector, another section, right? And when it comes to the monetary sector, money market and the money demand. So this is money demand, money supply, no, right? So money supply, sometimes we assume it's the inelastic type, right? We go this way also. Because money supply is a policy variable, right? It's determined by the central bank, right? Right. It's perfectly elastic type, vertical. This is the money demand. Right? So that determines the interest rate, equilibrium interest rate, and the real money balance, MOP. That is the real money balance. Real money balance. That is the money stock in real terms, right? The money market. So we see that, no, right? And the foreign exchange market. So that is the foreign exchange, forex market, forex demand and the forex supply, right? Demand for dollar, supply of dollar. So that determines the exchange rate. $1 equal, yeah, no, right? We expect 280, no, right? Before the election, right? Then we don't know what will be happen, right? After the election. So, no, right? So, right? So this is the foreign exchange market, right? Dollar rupee rate. This is the foreign exchange, right? Forex. Okay, right? So that's the market, right? So that determines the our prices, right? Interest rate, price level, no, right? The difference of the same aggregate demand, money supply, those are the main monetary variables, macro variables, right? We identify, no, right? And the aggregate demand that comprises the consumption, investment, government expenditure, and so on, no? And exports, investment, and price level, right? We form that way, right? Will come with the animation. So they determine the price and the income and so on, right? By price and by the relationships, right? So that's part of the what determine output the employment stability, right? So when there is income level associated with the employment level also, right? I talk about it. Now these markets, goods market, money market, foreign exchange market, there's imbalance, right? This market operating through the demand and supply, right? There will be imbalance in the market, right? Maybe sometimes money demand will increase, right? The income level increase from Y0 to Y1, money demand increase, right? Right. Likewise, because when our income level increase, we demand money for transaction, precaution, speculative like that. Why we demand money? For different motives, right? So that actually change the interest rate and so on, like there will be imbalance, right? When this imbalance occurs, right, that will affect this market. High interest rate, when the interest rate increase, it affects the investment. It's going to be changed, right? So that will affect this market, right? Likewise. When the price level increase, that's happening to this market, actually. Right? Likewise, there will be imbalance changes that will be occurred in the different markets. So finally, we are talking about the equilibrium in this market at a particular time. So that is kind of general equilibrium. Right? At a particular time, economy comes to the equilibrium, right? So that is kind of general equilibrium. Okay. So we are going to study all these things, right? In our theoretical number 1%, right? When we talk about the determination about employee price development. Is it here something that can make got some points, right? But we are going to talk, right, in the future as well, right? So this is the way of assessing things, right? In macroeconomics, right? So how we address the macroeconomic questions and so on. So it combines all these markets, no, right? And the sectors, right? Since we look at the overall economy, right? So you can identify, right? Right. So then we explain about the macroeconomic policies, no, right? Policies also, no, right? So policy is the so in macroeconomics policy highlight the important part, no, right? Macroeconomics. So, since we explained that one as a policy oriented part, right? Macroeconomics. It's called as policy oriented part in economics, right? So we use the different policies, right? So one thing is we need to influence or control the macro variables, no, right? Right. So the policy we use to control the macro variables, right? And to achieve the macroeconomic objectives, right? So we need to change the policies, right? The policies we identified as the fiscal policy, monetary policy, trade policy, exchange rate policy, commercial policies. Right? So there are different policies. Right? So what does it mean by fiscal policy? Mainly, that is the government expenditure policy and the revenue policy. Revenue means the tax, right? Tax policy is the revenue policy. Expenditure, maybe how the government is going to spend money on the economy, right? So those are called budgetary policies. Fiscal policies are called as budgetary policy, government expenditure tax. And the debt policy also coming under the fiscal policy. Debt management, that also coming under the fiscal policy, right? So the monetary policy means basically under the monetary policy, central bank control the money stock, right? So with the view to controlling the inflation, right? So the monetary policy mainly money stock and the interest rate. The money supply, central bank control the money supply, right? So that is the total money stock in the economy, right? So that may be, that is the liquidity, in other words, right? Liquidity in the market. Right? The central bank control the liquidity, right? Different instruments are there, right? Under the monetary policy instruments, right? We may have this bank rate, right? Statutory reserve requirement, right? Open market operations, right? Different policies are there and moral situations, right? So another qualitative, some policies also central bank use like the margin requirements, letter of credit margin. And recently we have that margin requirement increased, right? So in order to control the trade, imports and so on, right? So that's also coming under monetary policy. Basically, central bank control the money supply and the interest rate. Central bank control the interest rate to the policy rates, right? So expanding deposit facility and the expanding lending facility. So by changing the deposit rates and the lending rates, finance and rates, especially bills, especially gold, honestly. Those are the monetary policy. So the money service policy, central bank use in order to achieve the central bank price stability. Basically, right? Two objectives are there in the central bank. One is the price stability, other one is the financial system stability, right? In order to achieve the price stability, central bank use this monetary policy by controlling the money supply and the interest rate. And the trade policies, what are the trade policies? Trade policy may be the for substitution policy, right? Restrictions, trade restrictions. Sometimes government introduce trade restrictions, right? Very recently, you know that because of the license, especially on the government ban the imports, right? Ban the imports more than 600 items. Very recently, most of them are released, right? So that is the import substitution, right? Import controls, right? And also the export promotion policy, right? So that's also this trade policy mean import and export policies. Right? Sometimes government introduced some regulations, like limits on exports and imports, right, under the trade policy. Right? Maybe basically those things address the exchange rate, right? Controls, right? Reserve requirements, right? Foreign reserves, right? In order to control the foreign reserves, right? Or the foreign exchange, right? So saving policy, foreign exchange savings, right? When we are controlling the imports, we save the foreign exchange, right? So if we are export promotion means we earn foreign exchange, right? Earning policy and saving policies. So other one is the exchange rate policy, right? So exchange rate policy means whether we have the floating rate, or whether we fix exchange rate policy, right? Or manage growth, right? Now we have three fixed exchange rate policy, right? And the floating exchange rate policy and manage growth. What is fixed exchange rate policy means? It is not market forces not determine the exchange rate. Central bank or government officially determine the exchange rate, fixed, right? The market forces have no room to play, determine the exchange rate. Officially, central bank or the government determine the fixed exchange rate. If it is determined by the demand and supply principles, entire floating exchange rate policy, right? According to the foreign exchange demand, foreign exchange supply, right? So market, forex market, without any intervention of the central bank, right? Market forces floating exchange. Now we know that in 2001, now also the central bank announced the market even more room, right? We don't know whether it's controlled or not, right? So, right? And the manage for me, manage means the central bank manage. TBS manage. Float means the market. So there is initially the market is determined, but central bank manage the exchange rate, allowing the exchange rate to fluctuate. So at a certain range, right? So central bank use the reserves, right, foreign exchange. Sometimes central bank buy or sell foreign exchange in the market in order to control the exchange rate, right? So in relation to supply and so there is managed float, right? Most of the years we had a managed float system, even though after 1977, even though under the open economic policies, right? We introduced this, even though it says floating, but central bank used the managed floating system, right? So that is the exchange rate policy, whether kind of is float, or the floating, or whether it's managed, right? Fixed exchange rate is not excited, right? So it's not that, right? So the countries in the world, right? It's basically managed float systems basically. And the commercial policies mean is under policies that affect the business sector, right? Custom policies maybe, right? And so the policies of the right? So that also part of the policy as well. It's over that we also manage now, so right? Custom policies is the goals, right? The government. So those are the policies, right? The policies we use to control the macro variables and the macro objectives, right? Now, basically, we look at the fiscal and the monetary policy, right? Now, right? When we talk about this, we look at the effectiveness of the fiscal and monetary policies. So I think it's okay, right? So those are the policies, right? Right? Now, when we talk about the policies, right, there may be two types of policies, right? One is the expansionary policy and the contractionary policy. Prasaranaatmaka, Sankochana, right? So two types of policies by nature, right? Expansionary policies and the contraction. And there we have to realize the important difference between these policies and the shocks, right? So we know the shocks, right? Or sometimes it may be there's influence, right? Sometimes it may be opportunities also, shocks, right? Shocks may be positive or negative, right? So we can do some examples also, right? Now, first we look at this policies, expansion policies, contraction policies. So what is the difference between the expansion policy and the contraction policy? If we take the fiscal policy, expansionary means raising government expenditure, no, right? Raising the government expenditure, no, right? That is expand, right? So sometimes government use this expansionary contraction policy. Now the raising government expenditure is expansion. Reducing taxes, that also expansion, no, right? Because if there is the lower tax rate, no, right? That will accelerate, no, right? Business sector and so on, right? Lower corporate tax, no, right? Lower income tax, no, right? Now, since we have the high income tax, no, right? Right. So that is what expansion into contraction. There will be a negative effect on output in the capital, right? So expansionary is raising taxes and reducing taxes and increasing government expenditure. And if it is contractionary means reducing tax, government expenditure, increasing taxes, there will be contractionary effect. And if you come to the money supply, monetary policy, expansionary means increasing money supply, right? That is expansion. If there is a reduction in interest rate, that shows expansion. Right? Reduction in money supply, that is contraction, right? Reducing the liquidity in the market, right? If the central banks use, for an example, lower statutory reserve requirement, so that is expansion, right? The bank will allow to give more credit to the public sector with that, because bank need to retain small amount out of the deposit, no, under the statutory reserve requirement if the STR are reduced, right? So they can give more credit to the public, right? So that is expansion. High credit means high that increase the money supply and so on, right? Credit ratio, right? Right. So we can identify expansion and the contraction, right? And the shocks also, right? We see the shocks, right? So that also we use the markets, right? So effects are same, but we see these shocks may be internal shocks, external shocks. No? So what is the internal shock? Shocks. Now, if there's a drought, something, no? It's landslides, no, right? Flooding, no, right? Those are internal shocks, negative impact on the drought situation. External means financial crisis, no? The external environment coming from that. So we cannot control, no? Right? Corona also, no? Right? Social health effects sometimes it may be external. Tsunami, right? We take, right? Tsunami. So there is a positive and the negative, no, right? So now we got so much of reliefs, no, right? Donations, no, and we have the tsunami, no, right? කියන්නේ කියන්නේ සුමාපේට හම්බෙච්ච විශ්වරාම අද මේ පැත්තට නෑ කියන්නේ හරියට එකක් කෙරුවා කියලා කියන්නේ right ආමික හම්බෙච්ච so much of donations no right foreign assistance we receive no, right so that is the positive one right ඒක negative පැත්තකුත් තියෙනවා positive පැත්තකුත් තියෙනවා some benefits also there right even the corona නේ ඒකනොත් එහෙම කියන්නේ right got so much of benefits are there right donations assistance, external assistance, right? Those are the shocks may be positive or negative, right? Positive also there, negative also there, right? So we can understand these policies and the shocks, no, right? All these policies and the shocks are like market and the activity positives. But the shocks are even that. The shocks may be have great opportunities and challenges for the economy, right? It is arising the internal and external sources, right? Right. Okay, right. So this when we come to the national income, some of the things, right, that I want to highlight, right? It's the uniform, right? Yeah, I think we go right. So the national income, so that is the now we can identify the national income, right? So that is the overall performance of the economy, end result of the economy, right? End result, right? End result, no? That is the final performance of the economy, right? Economic. We measure the total value of goods and services produced, right? That's the GDP, right? The year, every particular year. And that's simple way, I know. Right. So how we calculate national income, you know these things. So we have the two approaches. Right? We calculate the national income, right? Based on the final product approach and the value added approach. We can take either final product, right? Are we going to include the some of the India measure the national income performance of the economy, right? We can take the final product, right? Or value addition, right? If we take the both, there may be the double counting error, right? Now, in order to avoid the double counting error, right? We have used either final product or the value addition, right? So we exclude the intermediate product, right? From the national income calculation. So, for an example, there is a one industry, output if it is a intermediate product of the other industry, no, right? You have to take into account that one, right? So we exclude those intermediate products, right? When we measure the final product, right? And in the case of durable goods, right? What we take, how we take into the national income, and the first instance of the transaction, right? Even though first line we purchase it, right? And we use it for a number of years, right? And the first time purchase, right? We take it into the economics, right? Okay. And value we include in the transaction when they are taking place, right? Even though we use it for a longer period. And for the government expenditure, that means education, health expenditure, how we taken into account to the national income accounts based on their historical cost, not the market value, right? So the government expenditure, right? So on education, we take it into account from their historical cost, right? Sometimes we have to provide some some activities, right? So we cannot measure, right? Right. For an example, now there is a Ramadan or something, right? So, but all the effective transaction we need to include in the national income accounts, except the transfer payments, right? Like, transfer payments are not effective, since there's one way flow, right? Effective transactions included in the national accounts. Sometimes you have to include the into the national income based on the included balance. If you cannot assess the value of certain activities, right? The assessors, they include the values of time and include in the accident. Some goods, right? So now, even though we produce the goods, right, to our self-consumption, right? They are not produced for the market, right? For our self-consumption, right? So we can value those things, right? Even with the housewife's activities, right? Housewife kenek innawana, right? Right. So she is doing number of activities, right? Effective transactions, those are effective, very effective, right? But because instead of that, if we utilize the servant or something, we pay, right? So that will include, but housewife activities not include, right? So there is the argument for that, right? Whether we include or not, right? So, but it is effective. We need to improve that part, right? But we exclude those things that will undervalue the national income in one sense, right? So sometimes we have to take into account these student values, right? So in the application of national income activities, right? Right. Now here you have given the example, right? Value addition and the final product approach, right? Or we take this production process, right? So there are processes the final product, right? For an example, grain, right? Give an example, right? Now we take the wheat, right? So that's the first stage, right? Wheat production, if we value that the total value is 300 million, right? And then it converted into wheat flour, right? Then its total value is 500, right? And then we use the for the grain, right? In the production, it's right. Value is 800, right? Total value. And then sales, if we make it sandwich and something, and then selling price, we take it 1,000 million, right? Different sales in production, right? And if we add total value, we have 800, 600, 2,600 total value. We take that 2,600 million, right? Taking more within this value type, actually the different stages production, right? We count it at 800, 1,600, 2,600, right? Total is 2,600. We adding the national income, what happened? There's a double counting error, right? So we gave those all these big values, right? So one input, right? It becomes the input of the other process, right? So that is actually we include the intelligent products also, all these things, right? So if we take 2,600 value and if we add it to the national income, that will there will be a double counting error. We overestimate the national income index. Therefore, what is the method? We have to take the value addition for the final product. Final